there will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, banks.
Listening to different podcasts, like in a whole different reality, which they think completely different things about Bitcoin.
They have got my money in their banking system. I should be able to access it, right?
Apple is live.
There's a good number of fucking, like, pretty smart Bcashers.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast, following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency. This is episode number 165, a BCH promotion and ZCash pump. ZCash fans in disarray, but Australians prevail. Featuring John Moriarty. Today is Sunday, the 2nd of November, 2025. I am your host, Jeremy. Jet is doing the producing, and BCH is looking good, and maybe not as good as the old ZCash, but we have moved up to rank 13, 1 BCH, $533.44 for 100 megasats, which is up 1 BTC. Sat buys just over 206.5 BCH sats. We're up slightly on the ratio. 1 ETH, 724 megasats. So big gains by BCH there. Selene 30-day uses 600, and our token, well, that's like 20 a day, every day for a month, actually. Nice. And the token on TVL is at 10,210 BCH. Our guest today, John Moriarty, runs the Bitcoin Out Loud YouTube and sort of general BCH promotional outlet, I guess you could say, which has explainer videos. He's made music videos, which you might have heard in the starting Suze screen, and also will play one in the outro, and has been a dedicated BCH fan for many years. Welcome to the show, John. How'd you get into Bitcoin?
Thanks a bunch for having me. Yeah, my intro to Bitcoin, it's all so far back now that even that is a little fuzzy. But it was like 2014 era where I was like, okay, I was on Reddit enough that, you know, I somehow came across the fact that Bitcoin existed, but it was scary. But I did like find a short temporary home in Dogecoin. So I remember like I mined, you know, like 0.3 Dogecoin on my MacBook Pro, my 2010 MacBook Pro, and got, you know, sort of familiar with the ideas and enjoyed sort of the enthusiasm of the community. And it was, I guess, a pretty smooth transition to paying a little more attention to like just the Bitcoin space. Some of my earlier, you know, Bitcoin memories are like, oh, there's this new company, Blockstream, on the scene, and they're like really hyping up this idea of side chains, and it's going to be really cool. So my introduction was pretty slow, and I was a lurker for a while, but it was around, you know, when the scaling debate really kicked into high gear that I started participating more online, and, you know, sort of cut my teeth, or is that the expression, whatever it is?
Yeah.
On just, you know, arguing with people, you know, trying to not be too adversarial while still like trying to be a voice of reason, like on our Bitcoin subreddit. And so that went on for a while, and I was like, the moment the fork happened, I was pretty clearly I was like, yeah, all right. Like I had in my Bitcoin holdings at the time, and still are, even, you know, relatively insignificant, or Bitcoin, you know, including Bitcoin Cash now. But there was a point where it's like, all right, well, they did it. They did the thing, right? It's like Bitcoin Cash happened. And of course, this was also before Segwit 2x was canceled. But even then, I was like, if I'm I need to put my money where my mouth is. And so, you know, I at least transferred a little bit of it, and it didn't take me long, maybe another 6 months to completely move over to BCH. But yeah, I mean, it was just my early experience with Bitcoin was mostly just a lot of arguing with people on the Bitcoin subreddit, and that was my excuse to like learn things. So like someone would dump some knowledge on me that like seemed like blatant propaganda, but I couldn't like. I wasn't technical enough. And so, you know, I dug into like, okay, what is really going on with Segwit? You know, does it really count to call it in the block, or have you really broken the chain of signatures? And I think like you could probably reasonably argue that like, yeah, this was a, not just a hack, but like maybe kind of a fundamental change in the way Bitcoin works. And so I was pretty confident by the time 2017 rolled around that like, all right, BCH is where I'm going to put my energy.
Did you get banned from the subreddit?
I did eventually. I stuck around for a while and tried to be a reasonable, again, just a voice of reason, just like challenging unsubstantiated claims or providing links and sources to scaling, like the talks at the Scaling Bitcoin conference. There's a couple good spots in there to like link people to just sort of obsessively. So I spent a lot of time doing that. I did eventually get banned and or at least temporarily. I'm pretty sure it's permanent because it like went back and forth a couple times. But I ended up getting into an argument with someone that I didn't know was a mod. I was just super ignorant. Like, you're somebody who should know the truth. Here, let me explain it to you. And even if it's not like, I think you should know the truth, it's like, here, maybe you haven't been exposed to these ideas. And it like blew up until I got like, just the conversation blew up until I got banned. And like I don't remember if the comments got removed or not. But I ended up making the post to RBTC, how to get banned from our Bitcoin by being extremely reasonable. And that was like one of my earlier just like long form posts to Bitcoin Cash subreddits where it was like, yeah, I really would have liked to like stick around there and continue to be, like I said, a voice of reason or something. But I also like maybe am better off not spending that time. And certainly like as time went on, that became very clear that like our Bitcoin was not worth any investment. It's just like, it's so far gone that there's, and maybe I'm like going back sort of on my like original premise, which is like, you just got to be a voice of reason. You got to put the stuff out there so that people can see it. But man, was it eventually like clear to me that it's just not even worth engaging there.
Yeah, well, that's sort of part of the psyop, right? Is because when it started on obviously the BTC community, the Bitcoin community as it was at the time, was not really prepared for this type of attack. And for people who were not obsessively involved in everything, or even people who were, it's very easy when the first few people get banned to be like, well, people are always going to get banned. There's always going to be someone being a bit out of line, taking it a bit too far, being a bit too unreasonable or whatever. So it's like, you don't necessarily, in hindsight, you wouldn't have, like we all, I guess, didn't really realize like we actually under attack initially. There's a little bit of like drip, 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 and then it started to like ramp up. And as people slowly got the sense of like, well, this is a bit much, like, and then prominent people or posters that had a bit of a rep or that people knew or could see making reasonable points, then they were getting banned. And then there was the sorting, the infamous CSS sorting by controversial, which has never been done, ever again in the history of Reddit, I think, basically, except for like some of the most troll toxic subreddits ever. And our Bitcoin, which is a very rational, economic, technological kind of space, suddenly was becoming like a lunchroom food fight type of vibe, and everyone was thinking what was going on here. And at a certain point you just got to kind of conclude like this is just bad acting, basically.
Yeah, well, and it's funny, like it's this whole like lunchroom food fight, but like the principle is on one side, like they picked a side. And so everyone gets detention who is just on the wrong side of the food fight. It doesn't matter who started it, doesn't matter who's right or wrong, you got detention, see you later.
That's right. It all wound down. And the Blockstream stuff with the side chains is interesting because at the time, I personally wasn't very interested in that. I didn't find it very compelling. I found it a bit of a, distraction, really. And I know Peter Todd kept talking about tree chains, which was this thing that never went anywhere. But he just said it a lot to kind of make it seem like there was a lot of different options. And then obviously abandoned it once it had served its usefulness. And the same with the Blockstream guys. They were talking about side chains and everything. And then there was maybe more than a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, Eric Wall was talking about like he did like a retrospective talk where he pulled up those same talks from Blockstream and said like, look at all this shit that they promised that they never delivered. They never did anything. And he is still like a bit lying to himself. Oh, no, they just meant to, or the industry didn't go in that direction, or however he tries to excuse it to himself. But like still to this day, there are people that still believe like Blockstream did not just pull the rug on them with all these fake ideas and stuff, which is pretty incredible. Like you couldn't really get away with that if you were running a company in most of other situations. If you were promising, oh, we're going to deliver the best new pasta sauce, and then 10 years later you still had no pasta sauce, people would have like, you can't even get, 12 months runway on a Kickstarter without people being like, where's the new Rolexes you promised? But these guys are they're still there, and they're still interfering in the technical development too. It's absolutely crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is pretty wild that they've managed to hang on to, the influence that, is now. And I'm sure we'll get to it, like maybe in peril or maybe not really. It's kind of hard for me to tell from the outside, like, but because it's only semi-related, but it makes me think of the fact that like a lot of like the stances from like the Blockstream or even just like small block argument side of things, like there's always like a kernel of truth in there that it's like built off of, right? That you sort of philosophically can't necessarily argue against. You have to like get practical, and I think that like at least at the time makes it kind of a little more understandable. And like as time goes on, if you just don't do that reflection, they'll look back and say, have they delivered? What did they promise? Have they delivered? If you don't do that and just look at like what everyone's saying on the surface level, it's understandably really hard to tell like who's quote unquote right. And so I can imagine people that like have not done and not even to say they haven't done due diligence. It's more just like they haven't reflected on like the right things. They haven't like practically said, they might say, oh, well, things didn't turn out that way. Well, it's like, okay, why? And if they didn't turn out that way, that means at the very least, the people making promises were wrong. Like that's definitely worth acknowledging, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, I have an episode that we can do at some point where I have somebody sent me on Reddit an archive of all of my old posts from our Bitcoin, I think including a lot of the ones that were deleted or whatever. And like it has the thread histories, it has different things in there, and I have a copy of it, but I just haven't sat down to really go over it. But it will be a great episode we can do of the podcast sometime where we'll go back and see like how many of these things would I still say today. I expect a lot of them would be very similar, but there might be some things that it was like, oh, I didn't expect that this would turn out the way, in a different way. And I certainly would have made a lot of predictions then, just like I did now. So it will be interesting. And I think it's also good because the show is starting to get to a point where there's like when it was very young, the show had a lot of listeners who knew a lot of that history and had been involved in it and all that sort of thing. But now a little more time has passed and there's the opportunity to really look back, like you say, and kind of think, well, then versus now, because that's how the frog gets boiled, right? Is 1 year to the next year, the promise slips a little bit and a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And it's only by looking back that people really get, like the 18 months Lightning Network started in 2015. It was supposed to have been by 2017 that they had delivered. And yet you can still to this day find people excusing Lightning. Oh, well, it would be, that's really starting to fall off a cliff the last 6 months. But it took, I don't know, 7 years of 18 months before 18 months was too long,
Sure. And it's almost like the transition didn't go from like, 18 months to like, oh, you guys are right. Like it went from Lightning is going to be here in 18 months, but then one day, all of a sudden, like the next day, Lightning is working. I'm using it all the time. You could be using it all the time. Everybody's using it all the time. Lightning has succeeded. And it was like 18 months ago yesterday, and all of a sudden, like, not only is it on its way, it's here. And it's been here for years. What are you doing? It's like, oh, no.
I mean, part of it is, the part of it is just the chaos of the world, in the sense that there are some people who genuinely work all day. They got a job in the Lightning ecosystem. They use it with their 5 closest mates. Their channels were never getting closed. They never had any problems. Like, it's one of those things where the truth is somewhere in the middle, and one side is saying Lightning never works, when yes, some people were successfully able to use Lightning, and other people saying it always works, but ignoring all the problems, right? So it's kind of a bit both ways. And then that's why the disruption is so key, because you already have quite a lot of gray area. And then if you have people deliberately creating FUD to amp up the rhetoric on both sides, well, then that's how you get division and ultimately a chain split, right? So yeah, it's quite interesting in hindsight, I think. What about after the split, you found yourself on the BCH side? To what extent were you involved with the BSV era, the XCC era?
Yeah, I mean, I was posting a lot on Reddit. For the BSV side of things, I probably gave CSW like the benefit of the doubt for a little too long, but I caught up pretty quickly and like was basically playing damage control because I it was a vitriolic, shitty situation just kind of for everybody. And so I was doing some writing, like you remember, I forget, so before Read.cash there was honest.cash, and then even before that I think there was a different one, but I can't remember the name.
Wasn't there the Yours blogs from
yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. And so I was writing there and did a little bit of stuff on like just talking about like the BSV split in general, or like there was one like shows of like someone who spends a little too much time on social media, but I like a couple call out posts where it was just like, this person is like getting a lot of upvotes and everyone's like acting like they know what they're talking about. So here's like 20 examples of them contradicting themselves. Like that sort of thing was like really important to me. I was like, I have something to say and other people are wrong. And here's my righteous fury in the form of at least semi thought out blog post. Right. And so for a while I considered myself just kind of like a writer. I was like, and I don't even consider myself a particularly good writer, but I figured, I have like high enough standards for writing that I won't like post something if it's still shit. And like that makes it so that like, the minimum quality I feel like for my output is at least like consistently not garbage, which, I felt like was that was something that I can contribute to the community. Right. And so one or two of those older articles would eventually get turned into like video essays on the Bitcoin Out Loud channel. So like I think the very first one on the Bitcoin Out Loud channel was talking about the group proposal, but this was like long before it was like a chip or whatever that was like sort of evolving alongside the PMV3 that eventually became cash tokens. This was like, it might have even been like around when SLP was activating, and like Andrew Stone was like, well, okay, here's like a possible solution. And this was something that like, I sort of get why now it wouldn't be the best thing, but I kind of took a hard stance and was like, release the client, do it. Because like, how are we going to make a decision without it? And I think that question has been answered in the past couple of years. How are we going to make a decision like without just releasing the client and see what happens? That's the chip process. Thank goodness we've established something. But early on I was like, hey, group, it exists. Let's put it out there, see who runs it. And so that's why like my first video was like, why a group client should be released for the November hard fork. I guess we were doing still 6 months at that point. But that sort of, I made that on a whim, just as like, again, somebody sort of screaming into the void with, what little potential I felt like I had as far as conveying ideas and explaining things to people. But that got the channel started, and I eventually had more to say. And so another early video was like, are miners a trusted third party, or even like a third party as we think of it? And like, these are all like interesting questions that I felt like people didn't have context for when they're thinking about Bitcoin. So that's what eventually got me into like then explaining more technical topics, because I would dig more and more into the technical side of things and be generally pretty fascinated just personally. Like I'm very fortunate that I've been able to work doing so much of this technical communication because I'm a geek about it. I like to say I'm just technical enough to get myself in trouble, but yeah, I guess that's mostly how it started. I'd have to check my channel to even see what are those oldest videos? Maybe I'll bring it up now. But that was kind of it. I just started talking at the camera and writing scripts, and in the vast majority of the work I do is writing the script. It's like getting down every sentence so I have zero wasted time, zero wasted words. I like to think that I can say in 3 minutes what would take other people 12. And sometimes that backfires on me because then I end up with an overly dense bombardment of facts and takes and things that just I think fly over people's head, and I've made that mistake in my other channels too. I do some pretty geeky music theory stuff and music composition videos that also get pretty technical, and I've had a couple videos that just very obviously go over people's head. But even just the act of explaining it and coming up with a script and deciding what I want to say is an excellent opportunity for me to dig in just a little bit more and make sure do I really understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well, the hardcore sometimes appreciate those things the most. You've got to have a few really dense ones for the hardcore, and then you've got to mix it in with some that are a bit more surface level, for people who are just coming to it for the first time or who don't follow all the ins and outs or whatever. And certainly as a BCH community, we want to have a sort of full stack of that. I've tried with the podcast to try and vary it up a little bit, where sometimes we have guests that are more intense or less intense, across the whole spectrum. And we'll see as the ecosystem develops around it. For instance, there are more things. There's channels like Paul's channel and stuff like that. Then that means I can move off some of those topics and let him cover that. We do the BCH Bullet now, which has some more sort of summary and news. So maybe we don't have to do too much of that. The bigger the scene grows, the more there'll be sort of independent products that we can do a full episode deep diving on that one thing rather than sort of a bit of a grab bag of news and events. But it's just as a community, we kind of need to somehow hit that entire spectrum, even things like making memes online. I know you're in the meme channel with some good
for sure.
good memes once in a while. That's a great little group, and I think it makes a real difference. Like you're saying, it's when you're putting stuff out there, you're just putting it out there, and you kind of just shouting into the void a little bit, and you never know who's listening or how much impact it's having, the ripple effect of viewers to your channel. I watched your stuff, and I was definitely thinking about it and was encouraged to see the BCH community actively producing content and stuff like that. So it doesn't really come back on you until later. Maybe it never does in a lot of cases, but in some cases you only find out about it years later that somebody says, oh, I really learned something from that, or it's led me down this path, right?
For sure. Yeah, I'd like to think that, so at least some of the things I put out there got to the right people at the right time. So after the BSV thing, the whole the eCash split, there was a point where I think Hidden Auto tried to frame it like there was an anti-ABC mob. It was that the mob is out for Omri, and I was just that is one of the most bullshit things I've ever heard since the scaling debate. And so that warranted a video. Just, is there an anti-ABC mob? And tried to just lay it out, as clear as I could, that any of the claims that that's the case were at best projection, right? But then also something that I hope made a difference, at least for some people, was when we were updating the difficulty adjustment algorithm. There was a point where I think it was Imaginary Username who contacted me, was can you make a video about the and not specifically about the ACERT or ACERT or whatever it is proposal, but just about the situation and the current proposals, and that was a pretty big project. It was just kind of digging into something technical, finding out the reasons behind the different proposals and the linear weighted versus non-linear, and then the what do you call it, the logarithmic weighting that ended up being sort of the most parsimonious solution, and the whole fact that that's its own sort of interesting, the fact that you only need the previous target and the next block to calculate it, that's sort of a mind-blowing sort of cryptography level magic that, again, like I'm just technical enough to like understand the implications of these things, but again, like I don't really understand elliptic curve cryptography. I've like watched a video or two and been like, oh, okay, like if I watched that video like 8 or 9 more times, like maybe I'd have some level of intuitive understanding. But that was I feel like an important project, and I'd like to think, like I'm looking at it here, it's got like 680 views, which is, you know, in the grand scheme of things, like absolutely nothing. But I do hope that, like, you know, I hope / would like to think that it made some amount of difference in people sort of gauging, like, all right, well, what should we actually do? Is anyone providing information? Well, that's kind of where I was. I was like, well, I'll put it out there. I think it absolutely was like an important thing to put out there.
I mean, 680 views is a lot of views if it's the right 680 people. That's the
Sure.
that's the thing about it, you know. So it's not always about the quantity so much as the quality and the impact and the snowball effect, you know, the butterfly effect over times as well too. And it's funny you mentioned that about assert and all that. That's held up pretty well in the sense that even just the difficulty adjustment, I don't know that we've never ever really done a deep dive on it on this show before, but at the time when there was changing of the difficulty algorithm and there was several iterations, right? There was the emergency difficulty algorithm after the split,
Right.
And then there was one other one, I think, the EDAA maybe, and then there was the assert. So it's actually the like 4th maybe difficulty algorithm that BCH is on now. But people in the grand scheme of history, that will all be sort of condensed down. But at the time, it was actually fairly sort of controversial, and people were taking that very seriously because some people had a sort of sense of originalism to the original difficulty adjustment algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't like that it had been changed at all, and maybe more so the BSV types were like, no, we should have just kind of stuck it out, even though in reality that would have been the death of the entire ecosystem.
Right.
They didn't want to budge
that
on
almost
Bitcoin.
certainly would have been real bad. Just, you know, the potential for a, you know, quote unquote chain spiral, like, or death spiral or whatever they call it, like, was definitely a non-zero possibility. And so, like, while the emergency difficulty adjustment algorithm, like, had problems, and like, if it turns out like that it was like intentionally done so that miners could like loot the BCH chain, like, for 6 months or whatever, like, that would not be super surprising to me. At the same time, if I had to pick between the emergency difficulty algorithm or just keeping the 2 weeks, I would absolutely take the EDA. Like, I think that was sort of a potentially life or death situation, and for the chain, and it makes sense that something had to change. Like, we have to say, like, that there's the possibility that the blocks simply stop coming in. And like, that's bad news. So what can we do about it? And unfortunately, the process by which that decision was made was not, you know, healthy or mature at that point. And so it took, like you said, several iterations. You know, we went from the EDA, which like just basically said, oh, if the not if the difficulty, but if like the number of blocks is like we get, but in this certain amount of time is below a certain amount, like just take an axe to the difficulty, right? And then it was like, you know, smashing the fire axe off the wall and just taking it to the building. It was just like problem solution. And then we got a linear weighted algorithm next, which was better. But what the really and this is just one of the cooler like aha moments that you get from Tumim's article, but then I also covered it in the difficulty adjustment algorithm video, is that like the problem with a linear weighted algorithm is that blocks leaving the window that you're looking at, you say you look at the past X blocks leaving that window have just as much of an effect on the current difficulty as blocks entering the window. And that causes like little echoes of everything. Every block that leaves that window creates an echo of the difficulty in the present, and so you end up with these oscillations. And this was something that apparently was actually simulated before the change after the EDA. Like, it was like there were people who were aware that a linearly weighted algorithm would lead to these oscillations, but unfortunately, arguably due to the process, right, due to the lack of a process, we ended up with still a subpar solution, something that was an improvement on the EDA that didn't, just beg, miners to, flood into the chain and then leave it, and then flood back and then leave it. Okay, that's probably good, but it still ended up with those oscillations, which is just an interesting implication of the technical stuff that you might not really think about. And it's like, and so like, okay, even like, what's the problem with oscillations? Is it really that bad? And okay, so then you get into the fact that like, even if the slow blocks are relatively rare, that's when the more transactions happen. More transactions are going to happen during the periods of slow blocks because they take more time. And so like the user experience is just degraded. And, as much as we, tout ZeroConf as a reasonable trade-off security-wise for the vast majority of applications, any amount that you degrade the reliability of that first confirmation, you also degrade ZeroConf. So that was just kind of a whole interesting technical debate that I was lucky to get to dig into a little bit.
I mean, it all got figured out in the end, and that's also one of those areas where once it's fixed properly, and it's just a quiet little secret weapon of BCH. I often feel like, on the BTC side, you sometimes see them saying, oh, they've had to fork to change their difficulty algorithm, and, what a mess, and etc. But now BCH is very resilient to being the minority chain, and it hasn't died off, no matter, what the ratio has been looking like, or the trend, or anything like that. And that's something that is just quietly there, sort of was also part of the reason, Abla is so amazing, is that you just forget about it. Like, the job's just done, that problem is fixed. And then when flippening is coming onto the cards, that's just a whole other mess that the BTC guys are not going to be aware of at all, while BCH just starts climbing the ranking, starts sucking away their hash rate. If it's volatile, that's fine for BCH. It's going to be fine. But for them, it can be a big problem, but they're not going to really think about it until it's already on them. And then it'll just be one more thing to add to the pile of a lot of other issues. But like you were saying, are you a fan then of the 1 minute blocks proposal then? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I don't have really much of an opinion. I think the idealist in me kind of wants to say 10-minute blocks is probably fine. And I don't think changing to 1 minute blocks should change that much. But if practically it does, then it's a good idea, right? I can't rely too much on this idealistic view of how people should think of transactions. If people think of transactions or confirmations, if people think of confirmations a certain way, and the transition period, say between global reserve currency and now, is going to be longer than we thought it would, and it's going to require more on and off ramps, or we're going to need to rely more on traditional on and off ramps than we hoped we would. And if in that case, then shorter block times would improve the user experience for those people who, again, ideally would be earning their BCH, but if they're buying it, we do want it to be a good experience. And if we end up with 1 minute blocks, I certainly I wouldn't oppose it. If tomorrow everyone was just 1 minute blocks, we're definitely sure about it. I wouldn't even be that worried about looking into it. I'd be curious about it as to what the arguments are or whatever. But I'm certainly not worried really either way. I don't think it would be the end of the world if we don't switch to 1 minute blocks. And if we do, I'm just sort of interested in seeing what the arguments will be and what the actual practical results will be, because that's a hard thing to test, I guess, right? What tests are you going to run? The difficulty adjustment algorithm, it was an algorithm that you could run. You take the input, you get the output. Here's how the new difficulty adjustment algorithm would have reacted to every scenario that's ever existed for Bitcoin in the past. that's easy to do. But like, okay, like how are users going to or exchanges going to react to a change in block times? Are they just gonna 10x requirements? Are they going to be lazy and ignore it kind of to our benefit and make it so that, they just leave the number where it is and all of a sudden we get, 10x faster confirmations at like essentially zero degraded, and it's obviously it's not zero, but like practically no difference in the security as far as the exchange is concerned, because, 6 confirmations, 3 confirmations, aside from really large amounts, you're pretty darn safe. Yeah, I mean that will at the very least be interesting to see though, because it does seem like since Bitcoin, does anyone have longer than 10-minute blocks? Did anyone say, let's go longer? So it might be the sort of thing where we need to sort of take a look at what's working for everybody else,
Yeah, well, literally, that's one of the fascinating things. Literally, I'm not aware of a single blockchain ever that has ever raised the block time. Nobody has ever found a reason to do that. Everything has just got shorter and shorter and shorter as the industry has developed. And people say, and they're right, that it's a trade-off between the orphan rate and the centralization on the lower bound, and the upper bound is the user experience pain point. So there is some trade-off there. It's not obvious, where the exact right amount is, but 10 minutes seems to have been a bit of a consensus overestimate as far as it's played out in practice, which is being, very curious to see. And like you say, we can kind of look at other chains. Dogecoin has 1-minute blocks. I think Monero and maybe somebody else have done block time changes, and the exchanges, their exact response, I don't know, but it's written about partially in the chip what exactly happened in those scenarios. But it basically is like people who say, well, the exchanges will all just 10x the number. Well, even if they do, it's no different, and they have to go out of their way to do it, and they're lazy. So a lot of the time they don't do that. And a lot of the time they might also just be like, oh, it sounds like a good change to me. As far as I can tell, I can't see a universal 100. I can't see people going out of their way to actively degrade BCH simply because we made a change like that, basically. So
even if the exchanges keep everything the same, don't we have the benefit of not having like the variance be on the extreme? So like even if the next confirmation is 4 minutes away, at least it's not 40 minutes away now, right? Like I'll take that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the variance, it's just a larger sample size, right? You're going to get less variance over a larger sample. And so if you make the sample quicker, you're going to arrive at the average more quickly.
Exactly. And you mentioned the XCC guys there briefly in SLP, which is interesting actually, because they just recently had their XCC conference in Barcelona. I was watching some of the videos. They've now published the videos. I especially recommend to everyone the talk by Mathieu, who went there and basically tried to shill them the upgrades that BCH has been making, like Velma and Layla and the cash token stuff and everything, and just saying, guys, like, this is kind of what you want to be doing. But incidentally, it seems, or maybe not incidentally, it seems like they're sort of starting to come to that conclusion themselves a little bit. Tobias Ruck, his talk also, he kind of says, well, guys, I think we might need some minor validated tokens like cash tokens. We're maybe going to need some transaction introspection, etc. And it's just very interesting to watch because of the historical animosity, right? Sometimes a little bit of time and distance from the event can cool people's tensions down. And also with time for things to play out, then people can approach it a bit more soberly and kind of say, well, what works and what didn't. But of course, there's always ego on the line. So it's fascinating to see them slowly drifting in the direction of like, well, maybe the BCH guys weren't so stupid after all, even if at the time there was a lot of finger pointing and acrimony. It's just interesting to watch that play out. I don't know what your take is on that dynamic.
Yeah, I guess sort of my one takeaway is just that, like, dang, like it always feels so slow while we're going, but BCH has been absolutely cooking. I mean, like it would be interesting. I don't know if like BSV or is it XCC?
XCC,
yeah. Like, I don't know, had made strides somewhere And my impression was like the only thing I ever heard was that apparently there was some improvements to node software that were like recommended, I think originally by maybe Bitcoin Unlimited, that like BSV ended up doing and either had not yet at least made its way into Bitcoin Cash tech. But like other than that, like we're definitely leading the Bitcoin pack. Like, and it's cool that we can be in a position to say like, look, here's what we've done. Obviously, it's open source. Like you can do it, but it's especially like just I think a positive move for someone like Matthew to go and talk about it at the Competing Forks conference and just be like, here's what we're doing. You can do it too. It seems to work pretty darn well. And I on the train of thought of like BCH like has been cooking. Like it's interesting like how a couple small things really did open up the programmability of the chain, right? Like it really was like miner validated tokens and introspection that just absolutely exploded what you could do. And even just adding oracles with like check data sig, like that made BCH Bull possible before cash tokens and before introspection. And so like the number of applications that just that added was apparently significant. But like just being able to say like, hey, what are you doing with the money? And then set rules around that. Like, no, are you allowed to move it or not? Like before introspection, that was it. It was like, do you pass the spending requirement? Can you supply the required, set of information to spend? And if so, you get to do whatever you want. And being able to just say, okay, not only do you have to satisfy these rules, but the spending transaction also has to satisfy certain rules. I mean, that's just like it immediately makes it way more like a financial platform, because like restrictions, like, I mean, I don't know, it almost sounds like negative, like out of context, right? Like, oh, making it so that people can't spend money they want to. But obviously, if you're sending money to a contract, you want that functionality. So for example, if you want a contract that doesn't let you spend more than 10% of the balance per month without, 4 extra trusted cosigners, you can do that now. Like that's not just cool, it's technically cool, but also like that's just obviously useful. It's like, oh, you want vaults? There you go. We can restrict what the money is allowed to do. But then of course that's like the absolute bottom of the barrel or the lowest hanging fruit type things. And there are things that, you can do with introspection that go way beyond my understanding, especially then once you add in cash tokens, which, was its own kind of neat sort of breakthrough. I remember seeing something from Jason Dreisner, who was working on his PMV3 stuff, and eventually like sort of came to the conclusion that's like, dang, I need some way for contracts to be able to communicate with each other. I need some way to pass verification of something from another contract to another contract, like send a thing on the blockchain that isn't Bitcoin Cash, like a token. And I was like, oh, hey, group guys, maybe tokens are like kind of where it's at. And of course, that eventually turned into cash tokens. Is like, and group, I think it was Bitcoin Cash Autist who sort of continued like working on and refining the group proposal. Just I mean, it's not like I don't think he had like given up on it or something, but even like there were points where it seemed like maybe cash tokens was the way we were going to go, but like just for the benefit of continuing to work on a possibility, like that kept going for a while. And I think that's kind of neat that there was like almost a capitulation for like, oh, like tokens are the solution, especially coming from the original context, or maybe not original, but what the way that tokens got really, really popular, right, was Ethereum. But Ethereum is just like you write programs, like you're writing JavaScript, and then they wrote a program so that people could mint tokens, right? But it turns out tokens are the totally badass fundamental primitive out of which other things should be built. And that that's just so cool because we got to be like, oh, look at all these people doing things with tokens. And then we say, wouldn't it be cool if we could do that? And then in the process of like, maybe considering all these possibilities for adding tokens, it turns out like not only can we do all these things with that other people are doing with tokens, it should be one of the fundamental primitives out of which we build everything else, because it's so efficient as far as like tracking state and stuff like that. It's like, do you want a bunch of applications to have to like think about where all the tokens are or where all the balances are and who's owed what? Well, you don't have to if those are just tokens sitting in someone's address. I think that's just like one of the cooler things technically probably to happen in cryptocurrency recently is just like, whoa, tokens like totally kick ass, and not for any of the reasons that they got popular, but I think that's really interesting.
Well, it's going to be up to us to pioneer it, which I think we are starting to see, and we'll touch on that. What about the more recent upgrades then, like Velma and Layla? Like you said, sort of the power kind of came from the introspection and the cash tokens, but then the sort of safety and efficiency is coming from the Velma upgrade and the Layla upgrade. And again, you can also see that being echoed in the XCC talks. They were talking about doing 64-bit integers, which of course BCH did 64-bit, and then it did the unlimited integers earlier this year, and then also the great script restoration, the different things that are going on the BTC side as well. Like everybody's sort of reinventing the wheel a little bit there, but certainly like cash tokens and introspection, there's a lot of power there, but it's not necessarily like primed to just take off without those extra couple of upgrades. So wondering if you had any thoughts, especially on Layla, right? We're 2 weeks from lock-in as well. So it's kind of a good time to get your thoughts out there about if that's the right direction.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the Velma upgrade was cool just because like it seemed like the research was done, right? The question was like, okay, what we obviously need more. We need more space for opcodes. We need to allow bigger numbers. We definitely need it to do certain things. And then the question is like, isn't it just like, oh, we need it, so we do it? It's kind of like the same way as like for BSV. It's like, oh, we should just unlimit the block size because it shouldn't be limited. And then it's like, there are serious repercussions of doing that. And like even just arguably like the main one is just capacity planning for like anyone running infrastructure. If at any point someone can dump a terabyte of data onto your hard drive, let alone like what what it'll actually do to say maybe the UTXO set or some of the more delicate data structures that are like held in memory as opposed to on disk, like it's not that simple, as just increasing a number. You have to like put in the time and say, will it actually work? Or what else needs to be done so that it can work? And that was pretty obviously done for Velma, which is cool. So that, the opcode limit could be lifted. And I know like Moria, I mean, I don't know how much they struggled, but like it was a limit they bumped up against and would have to refactor, upon deciding to change anything. So the fact that we could go from version 0 to version 1, where version 0 is just absolutely stripped down as far as functionality is concerned, not because the VM isn't powerful enough. Well, it was because the VM wasn't powerful enough, but not because like the fundamental primitives weren't capable enough. It was just that there were limits in place, and they were there for reasons. And so like it was Chesterton's, is that Chesterton's fence? When
Yes.
it's like, don't break down the fence if you see no need for it, find out why the fence is there, and then decide that whole process was, given my not super technical perspective, diligently done. It was like, okay, where can we increase? What are the implications to scaling? And what's sort of mind blowing is that like in the Velma upgrade, not only did we increase limits, we made the worst case scenarios better. That's pretty cool. So like it's one of those things where it's just like, that's just like, or at least I imagine, like, I'm pretty, yeah, it's like, that's engineering, right? It's like going in and saying like, how can we, if we put enough thought and research into this, we will end up with something better, because as much as like Satoshi was absolutely cooking with Bitcoin, it's understandable that he didn't like absolutely nail everything on the first try. And the first couple iterations are going to be huge improvements. And so like, Velma, and my understanding is that it wasn't like, it's not so much like the DAA where it's sort of like you can just leave it, but it laid the groundwork to other increases to various variables, things, caps and limits and things. It laid the groundwork for that, for more of that later, as long as, the research behind it says that, hardware can handle it. And of course, what hardware are you targeting? Ideally, commercially available, mid, if not high-end hardware, at global scale. It, will be quite understandable that you can't, validate and process the entire world's transactions on a Raspberry Pi 3. But that was neat about Velma, was just that like it's the attack vectors went down. We made a bunch more possible, and the situation for attackers got worse. So that's excellent. And then Layla, so we've got functions, right? Which is obviously just like I've only done a little bit of coding, but I don't know how I would do it without functions. So I obviously props to all the Bitcoin Cash smart contract developers up until the existence of functions. That's insane, but it's also very cool that we're getting them. And that's one of the technical topics where it's like I could see the potential for like, negative scaling effects of allowing like functions. Like, what are you really letting people do when you allow for functions? And I'm not as caught up on the technical side of things, but I do have faith in the current state of the BCH ecosystem and the current players enough to say like that's awesome. I think it's great that we're getting functions and loops, obviously. Yeah, loops is just going to be huge because, again, I can see how potentially scaling-wise, if we didn't have all these other limits figured out already, if we didn't put in the time to measure, like, what are the worst-case scenarios and what are the bad things people could try to do, like, if we hadn't done that, then maybe allowing for loops would be kind of dangerous. But, like, and this is something that Jason Dreisner has talked about, how, like, arguably the limit for Bitcoin script early on was that it didn't have loops. It was just like, how are we going to make it so that no one can abuse this? Well, just don't let them do loops. And of course, that turned out to not quite be true because he ended up having to slap a whole bunch of limits on like what seems like last minute before he disappeared. But let's see, where am I going with this? Limits, loops. All right, but the groundwork has been laid, so that's excellent. And now I can be that much more confident that like adding functions and loops is not a problem because we've got other things in place that make it so that just saying, oh, there are no loops, it'll be fine, like is both not good enough anymore and not needed. Like we've got limits, we've thought about them very carefully, so now we can let developers do developer-y things without worrying.
Yeah, and like you say, it also sets the groundwork for, I mean, the base cost is like 100, and I even suggested that maybe it could have been 1,000 instead, but ended up being 100 just so that there's two whole orders of magnitude that if hardware just suddenly gets a ton better, oh, okay, well, maybe we just change the limits down 10x, drop everything, boom, the chain's 10x more powerful overnight, right? And we won't need to necessarily, like, we already have the groundwork for these are the base cases. Everything's all set up with a consistent system. And so then you're just trying to get one change, one knob, just turn that to the right number rather than a whole panoply of like confused mess, like some kind of workshop drawer full of little tools and knobs and things like that, And that's sort of, I guess, also reminding me a little bit of this, the same idea with the 1 minute blocks. Is 1 minute seems to be the good value to shoot for now, but part of the upgrade is explicitly so that then it's just a number that you can change so that then if in 5 years or 10 years, 30 seconds was feasible, well, then that would just be like a one-line change.
Right, sure.
Obviously not for everyone, everybody would need to agree to it, but the actual coding and implementation part would be trivial. So it's very future-proofed.
Yeah, well, not even just the coding, but like probably the testing, right? Whatever tools people are and I know Bitcoin Unlimited did like a bunch of stuff about propagation early on, and like for like scaling Bitcoin, in the scaling debate and after. But those are also the sort of things where it's like if you build up the tools to simulate, and then you gather more data, and then like sort of go backwards in time, and then just apply like what would this change have done given all the data we have. If you have the tools to answer that question for you, convincing people of the change becomes much easier. And that's like arguably like the article from Tumim about the DAA was almost like it was like the first chip that wasn't a chip that did like a really good job of like putting out there not just the technical requirements, like here's how the change will work. It was like, here are all the options, here are their costs and benefits, and here's the results from simulations that we unambiguously can say this is how it would react to these situations. So not only can we predict the negative effects of the previous day, but we can, guarantee the behavior of the new one. And those tools are, and even if they're not tools, like the process being established for measuring or even just achieving consensus in and of itself will be better because we'll have done it once. Like that's, I think, particularly valuable. And we like to talk about like flexing our decentralization muscles. I think that's super important. And that's like what the chip process does. So while a bunch of other chains are, floundering in their attempt at a guise of decentralization like BTC, or maybe are just like centrally planned. It's like straight up centrally planned. Like neither of those is a good situation in the long term. Whereas like we're like people like to say, flexing our decentralization muscles. It's stuff doesn't happen unless it happens. I shouldn't quite say it. It doesn't happen unless it's decentralized. But it seems like Bitcoin Cash has arrived at a relatively stable solution for working out our decentralization muscles. Like we've got a gym and we've got a workout plan, and everyone else is like, I don't know, like you've seen those videos of people at the gym like doing like absolutely weird bonkers things. Like, it's all always rage bait. Like it's never someone. At least I hope most of them aren't serious. But it's like everyone else is like floundering around, and we're like no, we've got this. We've done this before.
Yeah, got the right form. Regularly getting in the gym. That's the other thing I like, that the chip process is an annual thing. We haven't had a year yet where there's been no upgrade, but I think that would be quite interesting, and we might see that in the next couple of years, right? Like at the moment, there's only one chip that's under heavy research, I think, which is the 1 minute blocks proposal. Not to say that something else couldn't come up for next year, but if 1 minute blocks is not ready and nothing else comes up, well, then next year will be like a no-op, but it will still just be going through the process. And because the VM is now so powered up, I'm sure we'll have plenty of other stuff to be launching and talking about and excited about and everything there as well. But it might also be, maybe the year after or the year after that. Who knows? Could definitely be a year with no upgrade, which I just think would be a fascinating case study. Like, we don't need to upgrade just to upgrade. There has to actually be a good thing. And I think even if there was a year where there wasn't an upgrade, everyone would still take it pretty seriously and be like, next year there might be an upgrade, right? You don't want to go too many years without an upgrade until we're kind of feeling like it's basically ossified, but once or twice would be fine.
Yeah, and as much as I'm not in a rush, I do agree that like it would both be interesting, and I think maybe like kind of valuable to have that no upgrade, because then at least one more angle of FUD against Bitcoin Cash. Like, they hard forks. Not only they bad, maybe if they're not so bad, you shouldn't do them all the time, and they're doing them all the time, and it's like, I mean, sure, but like it would be cool to be able to say like, actually, we don't always upgrade because we don't always have to.
Yes. Yeah. The UTXO commitments is the one other one. Callan's been showing a bit of research or interest in that. So I also feel like that might be something that might just pick up steam at some point. Also, Jason has his one for he's a bit tapped out, I think, or at least he's told me that he wants to give it a break. But the TXV5 stuff, but like you said, that's a big ask if BCH is not. Although he said, like, maybe if we were in the top 10 and we had enough clout to actually get people properly upgrading at exchanges and all that kind of stuff, it would be worth it. And to be fair, we're ranked 13, so we would need to double to get in the top 10 at least, but we're not, that far off. So who knows how things will change. I mean, obviously, you're talking a lot about the chip process, and that's where I want to tie it into this theme of BCH promotion that you've been doing for so long, the Bitcoin Out Loud channel. You have done the explainer videos, and maybe you can give me a little more insight on how you picked what you think was the most valuable to work on with those videos. Was there some methodology to how you found a topic or what you thought people needed to know about with that?
For a lot of the explainer videos, it was more like I had a burning passion inside me. Like I saw some level of misunderstanding in the discourse and just took it upon myself, on my shoulders. Like I need to fix this. And not that I necessarily ever succeeded in that, but that was sort of my approach, was just there's things need to be said. And if no one else is going to say them, I guess I will. So I don't know, the are the miners a technically a trusted third party video? That's not a particularly it doesn't really grab your attention or anything, and that's where maybe some of my videos have lacked a little bit, especially coming from someone who supposedly involved in promotion and stuff like that. But again, I come from more the angle where I'm just a geek who really wants to talk about stuff, and that's for a lot of it what ends up coming out. It's what am I currently geeking out about, and or what am I really frustrated about? Because sometimes there are just what felt like emergency situations. There was the video of the DA, but then also the video from 4 years ago, Bitcoin Cash is Making Cryptocurrency History, where I basically just called out the ridiculousness of what would become the XEC fork. And I was it's with at least a little bit of snark involved, but trying to sort of stick to my, not necessarily even just evidence-based, but I don't know, critically thought out reasoning of this is why this is total bullshit. But that was, I felt also a somewhat important video. And they were nice enough to at least pin it for a little while on the main Bitcoin Cash Telegram channel. And so it got 1.6K views, which again is not really anything, but given the size of the BCH community is respectful for what is basically a drama video, a semi-technical drama video. But that was also sort of in panic mode. It was I almost hate to put it that way, but that's where a lot of my work gets done, is when I'm oh my God, this is terrible. Somebody needs to do something, and I'm only me, so.
Yes, well, that's it. Crisis always spurs a bit of innovation. That's how humans are in general.
But also, I ended up doing some interviews and stuff, and that was me sort of branching out and into other content. And this was a little after, I worked with Bitcoin Unlimited under Paul, I forget, Singularity. And so that sort of let me dip my toes into the interviews side of things. And so the Unlimit podcast was a great experience for me. And I got to talk to some cool people. And I think that's where I first interacted with Saqib Noor, the guy behind One Dot Surgery, and also working with General Protocols. And that was it was just very cool to be able to talk to people who are building something, and obviously their familiarity with BCH varied a little bit. It was a lot of with at least cryptocurrency adjacent and aware people, but that talk with Saqib was sort of I had, you know, a little bit of an idea of what I was getting into, but like that kind of blew my mind. So I did want to do more of that, and I haven't done much of it recently, but yeah, there were some, I mean, you can check all this out on my, on the channel, just scroll through all the videos. And this is why I also feel like, you know, it's my videos, my video topics and format is a little too scattered for like the algorithm to really like me, even if, you know, maybe BCH is like shadow banned everywhere anyway. And so it doesn't matter.
Yes, it definitely is.
But even given that, like, I recognize that my content is somewhat scattered, and varies between like semi-snarky short videos to long-form, in-depth technical explanations to goofy Christmas songs with Bitcoin Cash lyrics. But
tell me about the music. I'm fascinated about that. We use your song, the "Bring Me Home for Christmas," on the Christmas episode every year. That's actually, you know, that's one contribution, you know, we've adopted there. But then I also like this other one, a Bitcoin, that I've got on the slide here, "The Last System Fucked the World." So we're giving this a shot. I love that one. Especially you have some of the synth sounds in the background. Oh, they sound so smooth. I don't know how you did that, the little bell sounds and everything.
Oh, yeah, dude. I mean, that was a big project, and I just sang for it. Like, I wrote the music, you know, laid out, you know, at least the chord changes and some absolutely must-have, like, sort of not even just themes, but like I wrote out some parts specifically for like the guitar and stuff. But then I went on Fiverr and just like rooted around, you know, sending people who either didn't charge too much or seemed really good, and gave them a shot at coming up with a part. And like, I ended up with some really good musicians. I think the bassist on that track is like absolutely exceptional. I mean, I know what I like, and I think I have pretty good taste. And he didn't just like nail it. Like he, I mean, he took, like, there was a point where it's like, oh, it's like the synth solo section where like the Bitcoin on the horse is like slowly flying across the screen. And I like gave him instructions. I was like, Hadrian Furrow plus Victor Wooten Insanity. And like, those are just two, just awesome bass players. And I don't know how he took those words and did exactly what I wanted him to, but he did. So that was awesome. But the keyboard, he did the synth work, and he did the little bell sounds. And to him, like, my input was just like, you know how, like, have you watched any of Bill Wirtz? He did like the history of the world, I guess. So it's like the history of the universe, but like broken up into little musical snippets. And he just has like cute little synth interludes, or not even interludes, like little riffs that just happen almost like once in the whole, like they don't show up again. And they're super tasteful. And I was like, can you just make it sound like Bill Wirtz? And again, he absolutely nailed it. I think he did the synth solo. Like I did a shitty version of the synth solo, because I got a melody in my head, and I was like, man, I almost hate to ask someone who's really good at keyboard to not just improvise, but I really like this little idea. Can you make it sound good? And they did. They took, like, I was like, and then I, like, obviously the was not notes or written out. I was just like, that's kind of how I want it to go. And then they did it. And so that was very cool. The backup vocals, I think she did a really good job. That was another situation where I sent her like a pre-written, like, this is what I came up with. Please record this. And then also please do whatever you think would sound good, and also send me that. And I ended up using both of them, like, just on top of each other, because I thought it was like, oh man, you did something cool and I did something cool, and they don't clash with each other at all. They just layered right on top of each other. So, yeah, that, like I said, that was a big project. And then the animation, of course, is not. I mean, the whole process of getting to the visual side of things is not my strong suit. Like I said, I think I have pretty good taste in like writing, and I think like my musical writing is also pretty good. But then when we get to the visual, I have just like very basic ideas, and that was a lot of work going back and forth with somebody to like get the visuals at least where I wanted it to. Like, but they also ended up doing a really good job. Like, even just the graphic that's on screen there, it's like, all right, you got the money press, it's flown on a machine, outcome tanks. What's the argument you're making? Money printing bad, wars. Like, I felt like that was a pretty effective visualization for, like, you know, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The last system fucked the world. How did it do that? look at the screen. you got green dollars, you got tanks, and that's bad. Tanks are bad, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like you say, sometimes, well, a lot of the time, creative people, they're just so amazing at what they do. And even as you said, this is not like necessarily world-class musicians or somebody playing to packed out stadiums, even just somebody on Fiverr who just loves that thing and knows that genre in depth and whatever, then boom, you give them a little rope to play with, and before you know it, you've got something really incredible. I mean, I think Bitcoin as a whole is also just a proof of that, despite being as technical and mathematical as it is in some aspects. It's also just such a home for creativity and innovation in an artistic sense, not so much a scientific or rational sense. And I think we're going to see more and more of that as time goes on. NFTs throughout the crypto ecosystem really did bring a bit of that flavor, even if there was quite a lot of financial scamming involved, but it did a good job of bringing that into the scene. And I think we're going to just see more and more of that in general. Like I've said it many times, I was mind blown that people were as enraptured with the Jessica NFTs that we did, and just tying that to the ABLA and just the effectiveness, like cash tokens, even though we had luckily crowdsourced a really good logo for that and stuff, like it just didn't resonate as much. And maybe BCH also, its promotional game was not as good, but it took months and months and months of saying, cash token. But the Jessica and the ABLA stuff, like did those AI arts and then made it the tickets for Bliss. And then I'm just on Reddit in like these random subreddits where people talking about crypto, like, oh yeah, did you hear BCH is doing this upgrade? And I'm thinking, how the hell did these people find out about it? But that just goes to show, with something that catches the vibe of the moment or that appeals to the ineffable human sense of creativity or imagination, and it just resonates a lot more. So I'm really hoping that we can bring a lot more of those type of people as well into BCH as time goes on, and that will happen as the monetary sort of network grows, I think, right?
Sure. And I think like in addition to just like, I mean, this is part of the monetary network growing, but like you need profitable businesses to hire creative people, right? I mean, I'm part of an extreme minority of people who want to make music about Bitcoin because I like Bitcoin so much and I'm a musician. But like, as the ecosystem grows and, people actually have profit motive to becoming viral or at least, doing their own level of promotion, like that's absolutely going to require creative people. And so, yeah, I look forward to, the constant two-way feedback mechanism of people being more creative and that bringing more people to BCH and that creating more opportunities for creative people to contribute. And
you used to do these videos, the BCH network discussions, but they sort of petered out at one point or another. That was more, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, people can go back and watch them to see what they were like, but it was sort of like in the pre-cash tokens era, getting a lot of the node developers from different teams all on a call together and sort of, kind of hashing it out, sort of somewhat reminiscent of like the ETH core devs type of calls. But somehow I don't know what happened, why you stopped doing them, but they don't, like, they might have served their purpose for that moment in time, if you know what I'm saying. Like, we haven't had any problems without having something like that in the last couple of years, which I find quite interesting because intuitively you would expect that we would. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that like that was during the sort of the almost like formative period of Bitcoin Cash trying to establish like what is our consensus process, because like we realized that, like, I don't know, leaving it up to incentives and then like having miners just like not make decisions and be influenced by by shitty public discourse, that was obviously a bad option. That didn't work out super well for us. So like that was like part of the exploration of like, okay, well, what's going to work? And I wasn't even like particularly involved in the sort of formation and ideation around the network discussions. I was just sort of semi-involved, and then was like, yeah, I'd absolutely host it. But I do think that there's something. I don't want to call them like a complete failure or anything, but I do think in the process of doing them, I at least sort of arrived at the conclusion that it wasn't actually adding a whole lot of value, because like it was an opportunity for one person to sit there and talk for 5 or 10 minutes, and then for other people to like, you know, take turns maybe asking questions, but like what sort of my takeaway from the BCH network discussions was sort of like there wasn't anything going on there that couldn't or shouldn't happen elsewhere, probably more efficiently. And so then it's like, okay, so why are we here? And then the answer really was probably mostly promotion. It was like, well, it's really useful even if it takes longer and requires everyone setting up their schedules and requires all this effort production wise. Like that's valuable if then it gets put out there and some people see that Bitcoin Cash is doing its best to have a reasonable consensus process. And so that in and of itself, I think, was valuable. And the fact that like they exist historically is interesting and cool. But yeah, I actually, you know, I'm not, just like you said, I think BCH has done fine without them. And I think that's because we've arrived at other forms of reaching consensus, and the promotional benefit was probably just not large enough to warrant the effort involved, right? Because I mean, that's a pretty big ask. It's like getting everyone on a call and then asking everyone to listen to one person just give a talk that they could have just like read otherwise, but we're doing it on video and we're recording it, so we need the context of someone like giving the talk, and then like, okay, and then like, is, you know, the question also that occurred to me, you know, while we were doing it is like, how much of my job is to like lead discussion versus just moderate? And the discussion part didn't end up really happening. You know, I think I'm a pretty good presenter and relatively good at doing things like leading discussion and getting people, you know, talking or clarifying points for in cases where I think maybe the audience may have been left behind. But because it didn't end up, they were the BCH network discussions, but it didn't end up really being much of a discussion. It was, like I said, sort of like, it was more like a one-off, or I guess not one-off, because there's some of the episodes we had like multiple people. It's like to say whatever they were talking about. Yeah, it was more like just kind of like a mini conference that like also was like, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was like centralized in its production, right? It's like certain people were running it, and I'm not sure like that was really at least long term the way to go, right? Is to have like somebody hosting these things and getting all the important people together. And then, you know, if someone were to like, for example, try to come up with a competing BCH network discussions, like they wouldn't like, they would almost certainly be like pulling people away from the BCH network discussions to make that happen, unless you're going to have everybody with their busy schedules making time for 2 big talks that get recorded so that we can do BCH promotion. Yeah, I guess that's sort of my ramble about that, is that it's like, it was worth trying, and like was part of the process of coming up with how can we have a reasonable process? How can we get people to say things in public? Because not like, how do we get people on the same page? And that's, I think, eventually sort of became the chip process, right? Which is like a public document. Everyone can talk about it anywhere they want, but it's a definite process. There's a definite schedule. At least I would argue, sort of made the BCH network discussions, what do you call it, when something is no longer applicable because it's old?
I don't know, redundant.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, that's cool.
But all that said, it was a good experience. Like it was a good experience for me. I think it was valuable for the BCH ecosystem, at least at the time, to, like I said, have people say things in public, have it recorded, and put it out there. I think that was certainly valuable.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how things move on. But like you say, I mean, we have it's a unique thing, like this whole governance process and all that. It has its own history, it has its own backstory, and Bitcoin Cash operates under sort of quite different constraints to a lot of other things in the world, where it is truly global, right? So you have people in all kinds of time zones. The community is also relatively small, so taking like an hour or an hour and a half of 10 people's time who are all like experts in their domain is just a massive ask, in terms of that time could be going into producing products and services and so forth. So it really needs to be delivering a lot of value for that kind of thing to happen. And the fact that it seems to work quite well once people got the hang of it, more via text and just general chatter instead of a big coordinated event, I think is quite positive to see. All right, speaking of the tech and upgrades, that's our next slide here. We've got BCH Blaze still rolling. We did the workshop with mainnet Pat yesterday, which I recommend anyone interested in Blaze or anyone just interested in BCH in general to take a look at. He showed off his new DApp starter app that he has made so that people getting into Blaze can just get rolling basically right away. Like, he's already got the framework for the whole app set up right there, and we'll certainly skip them past a couple of days of getting set up. And it was just very informative and quite different to what I had seen before. Registrations are open until November 14th, so go and sign up at DoraHacks. And I am going to make an announcement, which is that a lot of people were concerned about the Layla upgrades and saying, oh, well, I had this idea, but I couldn't see how to fit a Layla upgrade into it. And that was our one requirement. So we have the 10 BCH in prize pool for what's now going to be called the ChipNet track, which requires you to have one of those Layla upgrades, and that's the main prizes. But we're adding a second track called the mainnet track, which has, I think at the moment, 3.5 BCH of funding, which there is no Layla requirement. So whatever you want to make related to BCH, you can just make it. So if your idea doesn't fit into that, also the bounties as well, you can win with whatever. It doesn't have to have the Layla upgrade. So for people who are concerned about that scripting part of it, now you don't necessarily need to be so stressed. We were talking before the call, and I said I hope you'd get involved, but I'm seeing actually quite a good amount of traction around the BCH ecosystem, and people have wanted this hackathon for a long time. So I'm very pleased to see that going well. Have you been paying attention to Blaze, or do you think it's making a difference, moving the needle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think hackathons, I mean, I'm guessing that's one of the higher like benefit to cost ratios, even if the cost is like pretty high. Like it's no small feat to run a hackathon. But if I had to guess, it's just the benefit is huge. Just because people need an excuse, right? To finally dig in, and having some prize money on the line, and making sure that they're like the videos you're putting out that get people prepared ahead of time. I think that's extremely valuable. And I definitely look forward to seeing what people end up coming up with. Because like you absolutely never know, when someone might, realize that like using loops, they can do something like actually brand new and crazy. Like, and I can't predict that. Or maybe it'll be pay to script, maybe someone will be like, here's a situation where it's an absolute disaster if someone is allowed to just send money to this contract. Pay to script, done. It's like that could win just because it's like,
yes.
I made a basic application, but the whole point is to show that this would be terrible if we let people send money straight to it, or at least, let people send money to it as an address that most wallets accept. So,
and that turns into education, and it's amazing. Okay, all right, cool. Well, anyway, I do hope you'll be a part of that. That everybody can be looking for teams on DoraHacks page as well too. I believe now that we're past 1st of November, actually maybe people can start to draft out their ideas and jump on the teams. I should have checked before this, but I'm pretty sure that's live now. And I just also have a couple other little bits of BCH tech that I wanted to hit on just quickly, which is we've been promising the Selene new release, a new version for quite a long time. And I typed it wrong. V2025.11.0 will be rolling out in the next couple of days. It's already available at app.selene.cash. It's adding the much requested dark mode that people have been begging for probably over a year at this point. So for all of you late night phone scrollers, that should help out there. And we also have our pre-release stablecoin mode. So what it is, and for anybody who wants to be one of the early sort of testers of this, we're not putting it out on the main line straight away, but you can go in the Telegram group and there's instructions there. What it is you have Selene, send and receive BCH, but if you switch on this stablecoin mode, it puts your currency into USD like you can already do. And then anytime you receive BCH, it automatically swaps it via Cauldron at the moment you receive it into MUSD. So then you're protected from volatility. And then if you're sending to somebody else, if they need MUSD, you'll send MUSD. So if a lot of people are using MUSD, then just MUSD to MUSD is fine. But if they are requesting BCH, you can also just scan it and then it deducts that from your MUSD balance, swaps it out into BCH and sends it out the other way. So I'm going to be very curious to see what the adoption is like of this and the response that we get. But certainly we have been working with the BCH Argentina guys who say this kind of functionality is just a must. And it's starting to bring together the Cauldron work, the Moria work, like all this great work, and then packaging it up with the sort of consumer-friendly app, I think is just amazing. And I was playing around with it this morning, and it seems like it's going to be unbelievably powerful because this is obviously just the proof of concept. Once we have this working nicely, MUSD is the proof of concept, then when parity USD comes out, of course, we'll add that, and you can have 50% MUSD, 50% parity, 100, 0, whatever you want. And then for those, or for any other assets, if you want to have all your balance in Furu tokens, or you want to have it in gold-backed stable coins, or you want to have it in a mix, we'll probably get it so you can have some sliders and you can automatically have any incoming money split up into your investment portfolio, however you want to do it. We're just opening the floodgates to a new world of finance there in an app that is already instant, no registration, and available anywhere in the world. And with the growing cash token ecosystem, I'm just so excited about that. So I really wanted to give that one a shout out. And it's been a little while coming in that Callisti and I have had some problems with the infrastructure and different things. It's been a big feature, but we have got it over the line. What do you make of the BCH wallet ecosystem? Not even just Selene these days. Obviously, now we have Wallet Connect and Bitcoin.com has kind of faded out of fashion. Cash and I is coming up. Paytucker coming up. Potentially XO wallet. Where do you think we're at on the wallet scene?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still looking for we might still be missing like the particularly granny friendly app and so I that's more like an I'll know it when I see it sort of situation. I'm not sure I really have any advice to dish out, but I think it's great that there is this healthy ecosystem of wallets. That's obviously a really good sign. The idea of the auto conversion in Selene is really neat. I just particularly like that idea because people talk all the time about their exposure, but also HODL, so never sell, but also buy more because you definitely still have cash, even though you're really into Bitcoin. The whole thing just falls on its face is kind of silly. And the obvious, I think, solution or product to build is a solution where you can say, I want X% of my holdings or of my net worth to be Bitcoin, and I want some other percentage to be this token, and I want some other percentage to be this token. Manage it. Do it. Because there's no reason that I should every day have to go to Cauldron and say, oh, Fru 2x'd, so I have to slightly less than 2x, cut in half my current holdings and sell for BCH so that my exposure is where I want it. That's just like that's an obvious automation opportunity. So I think
I hadn't thought of that actually.
To be
yeah, I was
really
just thinking more, the incoming transactions, but you're right. We can add a feature that sets, target these distributions, and then every time you open the app, it just checks the prices and makes some sneaky little trades behind the scene to keep you in line with whatever you're looking for. And then as new funds come in, it just tops up the pools in those ratios. That's actually and also, of course, staking and yield farming. We don't have that yet. That will be, a ways down the road, but that's also the direction this stuff is going, So then, because I always think of it like superannuation in Australia, they have the retirement funds, what do they call them, the pension plan things, and the IRAs in America, right? And they like that is going to be the future, is people are not going to trust these government scams that charge you all these fees that you can only customize within these certain weird limits and blah, blah, blah. Like, people will just want a crypto app that they can just twist and twiddle every single knob exactly how much they want it, with funds locked over 10 years or 50 years or in different ratios, different sectors, whatever they want to do. And you'll just be able to do all of that. That's really the future of finance part of crypto.
Sure.
Coming to the fore. And we also saw this week, BCH Guru was saying that they were going to deliver in October, which they did not do. So this is not to call them out specifically, but they announced, that they had to delay things just a little bit. And I don't know what the new date is, but they said sometime in November that they're going to be making a new version of Cash Connect, was the reasoning, because they found that when they were testing the prediction markets and so forth, that there was a lot of delays with people making multiple transactions. And I think everyone will be familiar with this who's been using these apps. A lot of the time you have to consolidate your UTXOs before you do something, or in the case of Cauldron, you have to swap to another asset and then pay for something, or you have to swap out of an asset so you have enough for the transaction fee, and then you have to send some. And they just found that 2 or 3 steps of different little swaps, they're going to be able to not only massively improve on Wallet Connect, get it to be HD ready and everything like that, but also be able to string together those several steps so that everything just fits together, and you just get, I guess, we'll wait and see what happens, but one screen with this is all the details, one click, and everything just works. And that also has massive potential, I think, to improve our on-chain transaction volume, which is one of the areas BCH has really been, like, we're killing it on a lot of fronts, but the actual on-chain usage still leaves a bit to be desired. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think I have high hopes for Cash Connect. As I understand it, like, it's still going to be sort of like using Wallet Connect as the transport layer. So it'll be like, it's basically using the Wallet Connect standard and then deviating from the Wallet Connect, or using the Wallet Connect transport standard. I don't really know if they're separate, but then deviating from it, basically breaking backwards compatibility with the way Wallet Connect originally worked, at least for Ethereum. And I guess we already have anyway. Like, Pat wrote like sort of his own custom, really simple specification for BCH for Wallet Connect. So we've actually already deviated from the original Wallet Connect, and then Cash Connect is just going to be like a much more powerful deviation therefrom. I do like worry a little bit. Like, I don't feel comfortable really recommending apps for BCH to the average person, because I've never had a consistent experience with Wallet Connect. I mean, it just like, sometimes it just doesn't work. It like disconnects. Sometimes you have to scan it like 5 times. That's just like not acceptable to me. And I like understand there are plenty of reasons why that's the case. And I guess, well, hopefully maybe the problem is with like the app developers, and they can figure that out on their side. But if the issue really is like the protocol itself, being able to do much cooler things with it is great. But if it's as unreliable as it has been, like, I'm still gonna be like, do I feel comfortable like saying, okay, so you're gonna do this, and then it might not work, so just do it again, and if it doesn't work, just do it again. Like, man, I just can't bring myself to like recommend anything that might end up that way to anybody. So And I think my experience is not unique. It seems like just people all the time are kind of like losing their Wallet Connect session or having trouble establishing it. And I don't know where the problem is, but I do think that's a huge problem, and maybe one that's like a little undersold in the BCH community because we're so excited. It's so cool that we can do the stuff that ETH can do, and not only can we do the stuff that ETH can do, but you can do it in your own wallet instead of having to use an integrated wallet like, say, BCH Bull has. Like, they were able to do some cool stuff, but they still had to build a wallet and then build an app around the wallet, and then you send money to that wallet that can specifically do the task. And then if you want to, you can withdraw, and it can be non-custodial. But like, okay, so given that, like, Wallet Connect should be a huge improvement. Dang, I can use my own wallet. I don't have to like I don't have to add another seed phrase to my, hastily scribbled notes of seed phrases that, would be absolutely devastating if they were to like go up in a fire or something like that. The less of that, the better. But at the same time, I think just the Wallet Connect experience is suboptimal. It's like,
I agree with you.
A problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is definitely flaky at times, and I'm also not 100% sure where the issue is. Partly it's just in the UI that sometimes the scanning, the QR code isn't big enough, or the scanner doesn't pick it up if it's the right lighting. So I always try and use the copy paste of the text, which is a bit more reliable, but then not for every flow. That's not really super smooth. And there was the Paytaka Connect again, which was great because then they pioneered that and it was needed at the time. But then there was the Wallet Connect and then Wallet Connect 2, and now we're going to Cash Connect. So there's kind of a jumble of different things going on, and it's supported by different wallets at different times. And we're sort of half piggybacking off the ETH stuff, but not exactly. And so I think this is just a bit of growing pains. I think in a couple of years, it'll be like all super slick. The XO stuff is looking very promising for that. And even if not, like even just in Selene over time, we're slowly ironing out all those bugs. But it's just part of having to do HD wallets, being the first UTXO chain to basically pioneer a lot of this stuff. Like,
sure,
that's just a burden that we have to pay. It takes time to make things slick. But at the same time, I'm also excited about that in a way, because then that becomes our competitive edge, which is that the network effect is already there. And if anybody else is going to try and compete with us, which so far it doesn't seem like they have really wanted to jump in and do, it's just another layer of things that they're going to catch up on, not just the protocol, stuff, not just the developer tooling, but also the wallet stuff, and also the infrastructure, and also the integration of all of the different pieces together and making it all slick. And if that's, several years of work, which is expensive, as well as being time consuming for a whole ecosystem to put together, then by the time they've got that, we've already got the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that's just how you beat out your competition over the long run. So I am pretty excited about that aspect of it. And yeah, we just got to slog through till we get there, I think.
Yeah, and it's got to like have an effect, like profit motive wise, right? Like if ideally people will be able to measure or at least recognize when/if flakiness of Wallet Connect is affecting their bottom line. And then if you want to make more money, the solution is to come up with a better solution or fix.
Yeah.
It's so I am not particularly worried about it in the long term, or at least like not as like a first order worry. I'm more like we need more businesses, we need more entrepreneurs, and like that. I hope like the solution to that obvious problem will then trickle down or whatever to the issue that I see with Wallet Connect.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, speaking of trickling down, it's maybe more like trickling up. We've seen the last couple of weeks a huge pump in ZCash, which has gone from $42 to over $400 since September. One of the fabled crypto 10x's. A lot of it got started, as far as I could see, from Naval, who I actually like quite a lot, but he seems to be completely oblivious to BCH, basically, because I would expect him to be smart enough to figure it out if he ever gets the time to seriously look into it. But he's a busy guy. I don't know what's going on. But he tweeted that Bitcoin was the hedge against fiat, and then ZCash was the hedge against Bitcoin and a lot of people that was resonating with. So the message about the hijacking and about how BTC is not really a payment system and so forth has kind of got out into the mainstream. But as of yet, BCH has not been the primary beneficiary of that. Maybe we have been in some respects, like we're not doing too bad at rank 13, but ZCash really on a heater here. Of course, privacy has been a big topic as CBDCs increasingly come into the picture. I've also got some slides here of British digital ID is going to be rolling out, seemingly mandatory digital ID for every British citizen. And in Vietnam, people were getting debanked in the millions, up to 86 million people, as part of a new plan to implement biometric authentication on people's bank accounts. So certainly, despite maybe some salt from the Monero community, the ZCash brigade are powering ahead. What do you make of their sort of run into prominence? Is this going to be a flash in the pan and then they just kind of fall off a little bit over time? Is it going to raise the bar for privacy solutions? Is it going to be a sustainable thing? What do you make of this new entrant into the prominent discussion around crypto?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's kind of interesting, just like narrative wise, that like it's pumping and people are saying, oh, like privacy is pumping, but it is an optional privacy coin, right? Like there are regular transactions and then the ones that actually use the zero knowledge stuff. And so that's like maybe good in the long run. Just sort of familiarize people, I guess, with the idea of optional privacy. It is like, just comparing it to BCH, like the direction we're heading is you'll be able to do cryptographic math in the script language. Therefore, you can create a covenant that is ZCash or is Monero, and like just it'll just work. Like you send money into that covenant, and then while it's there, you can do all the private sending and then withdraw back to regular chain BCH, and that's the difference. Is of course, like ZCash has bet on a specific privacy solution, and so has Monero. And so while, of course, like I highly respect people who are privacy minded enough to like sort of want to impose it, like the people on Monero, I also respect, at least don't have anything particularly negative to say about ZCash for being optionally private, because this is basically where we're heading with Bitcoin Cash anyway, or where we already are, obviously, with tools like Cash Fusion. I do wonder how much of this is organic, like, how much of it is it, like, as much as I just said, like, it could be really good for BCH, because if ZCash gets a bunch of traction and eyeballs, and then Bitcoin Cash can say, here's the ZCash contract. We have that. Like, that's valuable. Any other coin that like we can just sort of emulate and then piggyback off of is a good thing. But at the same time, I do wonder, like, okay, if this isn't organic, which how do you even define organic? I don't know. But if, say, there's like some amount of iffiness here in the price movement, and it's not as organic as maybe some Zcash fans like to believe, then like, what's the end goal? That's what I wonder. It's like, okay, why pump Zcash? And maybe the answer is to take attention away from other better privacy options. Maybe it's to just like better to pump Zcash, which is optionally private, than Monero, which is currently the leader. Like, maybe it's more just like, oh, we just need Monero to not be doing so well, so maybe if we can take eyes off of it with Zcash, that's kind of where my mind goes. Is like, why the pump? Like, who, why, what, and then I get to like, okay, can we benefit from it as Bitcoin cashers?
There's definitely an angle of that, and you're hitting on something. Of course, it kind of cuts both ways, because on one hand, I'm very happy for everybody in ZEC community, and if they're getting more prominent and they've been in that and they've been working for a long time and it's their time in the sun, then that's not to take anything away from them. Like, I'm sure they've quote unquote earned it in the way of putting in their time and building up their whole ecosystem and stuff. Exactly the same thing we do here. So I'm certainly not like salty or anything about that, but at the same time there's also been a lot of chatter. And it's hard to separate from some of the people, especially people who are in Monero or whatever, who are a bit saltier about it, or BTC people who feel like their number go up status is being threatened or whatever, with people saying, oh, yeah, there was issues with the way it was initially issued and there was a sort of choked off supply. And then the fact that, the privacy is only optional. Is that a good or a bad thing? If big accounts are suddenly coming out of nowhere to pump it, is that because they've just stacked up a big bag and then they're going to be doing something behind the scenes or whatever? Is it, so much interest in this seemingly out of nowhere, not, prompted by seemingly anything? Is it organic or not? There's definitely been a lot of chat about that, and I have not looked into it all in extreme detail, so certainly don't take my word for it, and listeners to the show can do their own due diligence. I'm sure if they've listened to plenty of this show, they kind of know what to be looking for. But I'm very interested to see how it plays out. I put in the BCH Bull chat, I wish that they had BCH Bull had ZCash, because I'm not in a rush to actually acquire any ZCash. I don't feel like I have a actual strong need for it. But if they're going to keep pumping and I can ride on the price gains while they're in the limelight, that would be brilliant. So I guess, and that's also, like you say, with the cash tokens potential, it sort of all comes back to the same with the Selene wallet and everything, is if we can have a little token that you can just swap into, which is the ZCash coin, and one that's the Monero coin, and maybe even one that chains them together. So you've got kind of the benefit of both. That's where it's really just like BCH does it all. And as far as I know, ZCash is not pivoting into DeFi. Gosh knows how much reworking and changing things up they would need to do that. Monero doesn't have that at all. So I feel a lot more confident in the direction that if you have the DeFi, you can add the privacy. Whereas if you have the privacy, adding the DeFi is a lot harder of a stretch. But you want to have everything, and every coin in crypto is going to, the work that they're pioneering, as much as possible, we should look to copy it. But it's certainly like Dash has also been making some gains, and just privacy is really on the agenda. What about the digital ID stuff? Do you have an angle on that? Various countries around the world, sort of as predicted by basically everyone, slowly starting to tighten the authoritarian reins there.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely scary. I don't have a knee-jerk negative reaction to the idea of digital identification, but obviously centralized digital identification is an absolute nightmare. I mean, there's just there's no chance that's going to be good for the average person. It's going to be an opportunity for crushing dissent and picking and choosing selective law enforcement. There's just all sorts of problems that giving a centralized authority that power to maintain the aspects of what allow you to be you in modern day society. That just sounds terrible. I mean, I can't imagine that working out well, at least in the long run. Maybe it's the sort of thing you can have a good king, even forget democracy, even monarchy. You might have a half decent king for 20 years even, but I think it would be still hard to argue oh, there are good kings, so therefore monarchy is good. It's no, dude, this is bound to end up badly.
Yes, it all comes back to that centralization of governance. We're coming full circle. And so on that, we've got to do our little drama segment. of the week, but this is a good
Yes.
one. This is a really, really good one. It's now been a week or two because we haven't had the podcast episode, but there was an all-timer, I would say. Bitcoin has a strong tradition of debates, obviously, going right back to the whole concept of no physical violence type of war of ideas. It has a long tradition of debates, and we saw one of probably the best ever in the last couple weeks here at Lugano for the BTC guys, Jamison Lopp and Peter Todd representing the Core 30 quote-unquote spammers against Mechanic and Luke Dasher from the Knots side. We have two clips here, which I think we'll just discuss separately. They're both a couple minutes each, but I think this is just historic Bitcoin discussion for all forks that everyone should be paying attention to and be aware of, and it ties into a lot of the themes that we've been following on the show. So let's have a bit of a listen to this. The first one should be at 1:57.
From centralization. So I maintain a fork of Bitcoin Core, and notably, to be very clear, fork Bitcoin Core that's meant to have the exact same consensus, but then has different relay policy. And I think the bit of an irony here is when Mechanic here talks about routing around, my fork Libra Relay does exactly that. It is a fork of Bitcoin Core that intentionally connects to other Libra Relay nodes, specifically to route around nodes that, call it filtering, call it censorship, whatever, do not relay transactions that Libra Relay does. So the purpose of Libra Relay is very literally to go route around other nodes and relay transactions that other implementations won't. Hence the Libra in the name. And of course, I'm not expecting many people to actually run this. I mean, long story short, Greg Maxwell called it a bit of a performance art project, but it's just a good example of how if you want to go and relay information, you certainly can.
Any kind of response to that on the either Luke or Mechanic?
I think it's important that the audience realize that Peter Todd is a bad actor and his Libra Relay is an attack on the Bitcoin network.
I'm a bad person incapable of love.
He's intentionally trying to bypass the peer-to-peer network to flood the network with spam.
Yeah, it very effectively routes around people who do not choose to relay those transactions.
I mean, let's say that Peter and I are bad actors.
Sure.
Let's say that we are. What are you going to do about it? That's why we are here. How are you going to stop us?
Do I need to mention?
Let's talk about the future of Bitcoin and how you're going to stop us.
I mean, the network is having an immune reaction. We are watching it happen.
Yep.
So there's your answer. And like many immune reactions, the immune reaction is accomplishing essentially nothing. Libra Relay works just great. And biners who choose to run compatible nodes with it, and a bunch of them do, depending on what policy you're talking about, essentially 100% of them do. I mean, the immune reaction isn't really doing anything, so all right, fine, what are we going to do next?
You may be trying to dissuade people or discourage them, but it's not doing nothing.
So there you have it. Peter Todd, a classic of the bad actor accusations from the big blocker side. It's fascinating to see the infighting happening here as tensions over in BTC have spilled out to the point of open sort of bad faith discussions. I think Jameson, I always forget how to say it properly. He was getting himself into a little bit of a corner there with, he's trying to make a rhetorical point, like hypothetically, if we were the bad actors, the point is that you don't have a plan to stop this, and in fact, we don't either because it can't be stopped. But the reality is, it's not a bad, it's not a great look to be on stage saying, yeah, we're the bad actors, guys. Like, what of it,
Yeah, it's interesting that, I don't know, he didn't feel the need, or maybe like was going for the shock value, but didn't realize that like it just wasn't a good look, because like you could see the point he's trying to make, like you said, which is like, okay, if you can't stop us, then what? And of course, the response wasn't like, well, we're not even going to think about if we can't stop you. We are stopping you. We're doing it now. And then the answer is, no, you're not. And yes, we are. Okay.
Well, that's right. Like with Mechanic and Luke are sort of, and we'll see this a little bit in the next clip as well, but they're having a bit of a tough time here because even though sort of the crowd is on their side, I think you see in the next clip, and also they're onto something with this idea of the bad actors, you know, after of course dismissing stupid shitcoiner bcashes for, you know, criticizing Bitcoin Core for bad acting for many years. They've now, you know, discovered themselves in the same situation. Those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones kind of an idea.
I think that's particularly funny. Just like, what do you think changed between then and now? Like, there was someone on Twitter that I ended up responding to who was like, you know, they basically made the argument that like no one bought out the core devs last time. With the block size debate, they bought out the companies. This time they bought the core developers. And it's like, do you think no one thought of that? They were just like, oh, let's buy up the communities. I mean, the companies, and then they were like, "Oh, dang, those developers thwarted us. We didn't think to pay them off." It's like, what? That's just absolutely mind-boggling that you can say like, "Oh yeah, like everybody was right last time, but now they're not only are they wrong, they're bad actors who have been paid off by shady organizations to kill Bitcoin. Like, oh, they absolutely nailed saving it last time. They were the literal saviors." But sometime between then and now, they've been corrupted.
But they do genuinely believe that. That's the thing. To us, it's ridiculous because they think that, yeah, Blockstream and the devs were the good guys, and then evil Bitcoin.com and Coinbase and etc. were the corporate takeover last time, which the node runners stopped. And they think that all went great. And then just in the last quote unquote couple of years, somehow Chain Code Labs, who is basically just the same, you know, it's pretty much the same people. It's just the ball has been moved, you know, the shell game has been moved one shell over. They think that, oh, well, in the last 3 years, Bitcoin Core has become woke and they have all this exculpatory excuses and how that was when it went bad. And it's just, yeah, very funny because it's gone from, oh, what do you mean this is such a conspiracy theory, to, no, it's definitely happening, but it just didn't happen when you said it did. And then, because once you concede that, well, if you agree with us that there was a hijacking and that there was bad actors and so forth, then it really throws into question, did it only start when you noticed? Are you 100% confident that it wasn't happening? It only started exactly when you noticed? You know, that's a tough square to circle, you know.
For sure.
Jet, I don't know, do you have a take on this?
This reminds me a little bit of Callisti being like, just fork it. Just fork it. Like, what are you going to do about it? And
exactly.
I wonder how it was like for Jameson to be on the stage and be like, what are you going to do about it? Because I don't feel like he's ever that, like he's, you know, things have been implied, but I feel like that's the first time he's been so outright.
Well, that's kind of where they got to on their Twitter debates. And then it was just like, would somebody actually, you know, man up and say it kind of on stage? Which, of course, it's so funny as well, too. Like the BCH discussion, like between Bliss and Twitter is like identical. Like there's no unspoken gap there or anything, because people just in general are nice. And to the extent that people want to call someone out as like an asshole, they will actually just do it in person the exact same way. Like there's no, but on the BTC side, they have a bit more like keyboard warriors, like people who are talking shit on Twitter and then, you know, in person, they're like, can't, you know, face the music, or they won't say it as directly, or, you know, kind of be like, everyone knows, but nobody wants to say the emperor has no clothes type of stuff. So yeah, it's just, and it's fascinating that it's literally Peter Todd. He's still at it. And then it is exactly what the big blockers told them, but they just don't want to hear that. But then, yeah, of course, Luke and Mechanic are sitting there kind of like, oh no, it is working. It is working. But you can say that all you like. If it's not working, if every day there's more quote unquote spam going onto the chain, and you've been saying for 6 months, that we need to stop this, and nothing stopped, which is the point that Jameson makes several times in the debate. Like, you got to do something new, guys. And it's just when you're, maybe Twitter debates, you can log off and, go get something to eat and just cope about it. But when you're on stage, everyone's like, you actually don't have any more answers. You don't have any more answers. Anyway, that goes into the second little clip here. Let's hear that at 2 hours, 9 minutes and 20 seconds.
Focus to that. Why don't you tell everyone why you want to force every Bitcoin user to store and distribute child porn?
Wait. Was that 20 minutes?
Yeah, 20
minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a bet about this before that would come up.
All right. So
moving on.
Answer the question. Why do you want to force everyone in this room to store child porn and distribute it?
I mean, as BitMEX went and showed, this just isn't a question we can go stop one way or the other. I mean, this is a legal question, and unfortunately, the answer here is political.
It's not just a legal question; it's a moral question.
I mean, why do I go run nodes that go and transmit transactions that go pay for the stuff? I mean, we've had this question since the beginning of Bitcoin, and
we have.
Don't transmit transactions.
Let me address
this.
Record it. We have a very long precedent that was set by Satoshi. Initially, hold on, let me address this because it's relevant. When WikiLeaks started transacting on Bitcoin, it made Satoshi pretty uncomfortable. And he said, famously, it would have been nice to have gotten this attention in any other capacity. We have kicked the hornet's nest, and now the swarm is headed towards us. It was scary. Let's be honest. Bitcoin is strong and it's anti-fragile, but there is a degree of discomfort that people that want to engage with the network will tolerate before they walk away from it. And Satoshi set a pretty strong precedent then that money needs to be neutral to work. One Bitcoin needs to be one Bitcoin. And ultimately, maintaining a ledger that reflects financial history, no matter how egregious that financial history is, I don't care. I've said this many times before. I don't care if you're buying, if you're buying a glass of milk or if you're financing Al-Qaeda or something. I don't care. It's all money, and it's defensible having a neutral monetary network. But humans fundamentally do not consider file storage the same thing. So if someone gets caught, let's move away. The CSAM argument has been brought up. I don't like talking about it because it's such an emotionally charged topic that people think immediately I'm trying to be manipulative. But there are there is file storage protocols out there that people will not use to the degree where they expect the world to view them as doing something admirable. You're not going to run a file storage server in your house and give people the ability to anonymously upload any data to it for some ethical, greater design, because people just don't work like that. If someone's getting dragged off to jail because they have illicit government, files, illegal pornography, malware, all that stuff, which, by the way, the Bitcoin network is a gift to anyone that wants to engage in that kind of stuff because it has anonymous upload and it has enthusiastic people.
I keep playing a little bit.
I relay this to anyone on request. That stuff is just not something that most people I know are prepared to say, yeah, I'm willing to do that. To have Bitcoin be what it needs to be, I'm willing to run a neutral file server in my house. And that is why I think, Bitcoin, oh my God, it didn't die the day they released Core 30. And if you want to make straw man positions like that, fine, but you just make yourself look like a clown. No one is saying it's going to die today, but I'm saying you're putting pressure on nodes to become arbitrary file storage systems, and most people don't really want the headache that comes with that because it has nothing to do with money.
Look,
I'll just play a little bit, another 5 seconds. You can hear
we had this discussion.
The crowd. All right, that's enough. That's enough. But well, yeah, like you just really, there's a lot going on here because, firstly, Mechanic is making a very sort of popular argument, but even though he's right about the bad actors, he's wrong that it's really that possible to stop people uploading data to Bitcoin. And to the extent that he wants to make some changes to do that, they just want to do it with filters at the relay level, which is just not going to work. And he kind of shoots himself very badly in the foot by saying, oh, nobody said that Bitcoin was going to die or BTC was going to be over. That's just a straw man. Nobody actually said that. And you can see Stefan, the moderator, is looking at his phone a little bit because he's like, no, he definitely has said that.
Yeah.
And you can see that on the next slide. Of course, all the receipts are there. Like we've covered it on this show ourselves as well. These were just some sample, but there was many others as well too, of Luke saying Bitcoin Core is released. If people adopt it, it's going to be over. BTC is going to die. It's going to be the end of BTC. If this gets in, it's going to be like BSV, where the child porn gets uploaded and the whole thing just falls apart. Like it's going to be a disaster, etc., etc. So they have actually been saying that, and it's just so ironic that he and Luke get so upset about straw men and gaslighting when they can't really hold it together with their own position. And that's why having it on stage is so important, because again, if you have all these big talk on Twitter and then you show up to this debate and you try and sort of walk it back in public, like people are going to notice that. So even though he got, a big round of applause and probably the quote unquote, the plebs or the general opinion is on his side, at the end of the day, the position of Jameson and Peter is more consistent with how they represent themselves in advance. What did you make of that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think anything besides, why are you talking about this now? Like, I realize it's because of the Opportune thing, but the inscriptions Taproot thing has been there for 3 years?
2.5 years, yeah. Nearly 3 years, yeah.
You can already upload arbitrary large amounts of data. So what do you think you're I just why was the Opportune
the straw that broke the camel's back?
Like, oh man, child sexual abuse material in witness data, A-okay. Opportune, you're killing Bitcoin. And it's just like, I realize that there's sort of nuances to his argument, and then also to the can you prevent it argument, but all that just goes to the wayside for me the moment I remember that this has been possible for a long time.
Yes.
Using a slightly different method.
Yes.
And you weren't worried about it. It was but because it was an accident, it was like, oh, we didn't intend this functionality, so it's not a problem. But now they're increasing Opportune to encourage it, so now I'm really mad. It's like, I can't wrap my mind around the position where you're like, oh, well, now they're doing it on purpose.
Well, it's because it's because it's interrelated with all their other propaganda. That's where the problem is because when the Taproot thing happened, like if that had happened and we said at the time, if something like that happened on BCH, everyone would just be like, okay, this is a bug. Nobody meant for this to happen. We'll just schedule it into the next network upgrade, get it fixed, bada bing, bada boom. Good job, guys. Moving on. But they were kind of like, oh, what do we do about this? We can't hard fork to fix it. We can't, do a soft fork necessarily. Like, is this allowed? Is this not okay? A whole market developed. They were not planning to offer like cash tokens or something that would actually fill that niche. What is the meaning of Bitcoin? We've been shilling it as digital gold, but now it's data storage, but it's kind of P2P cash, but it's not really. So it's a confused mess. And no, so then that just let everything stagnate in that situation. And then you had enough hijinks from the Bitcoin Core contributors where Peter Todd was dusting off the old pull requests to, get the filters tweaked. And then, of course, they changed the documentation where instead of saying, okay, Taproot was a bug, they changed it. So it said, well, this is just how it works now, and said, okay, the documentation says that this is okay, even though we changed the documentation to allow it. They kind of said it is what it does rather than what what somebody would ideally want it to be. And it's all kind of semi-ossified and that's all been just slowly boiling away as they've been getting more and more frustrated this so-called monetary maximalists, the sort of not side of Luke and Bitcoin Mechanic, and then it's just the straw that broke the camel's back, and it has been that they were protesting against Core 30 and they were going to run their NOTs nodes, and they did all that, and then that made no difference. It got released. It's now more popular than NOTs. It took a couple of weeks for a bunch of people to update, but they have updated, and now NOTs is stalled at 20%, and it's kind of universally understood that Core actually isn't like it's created some dissent, surely, but it's also not like 90% of the community are railing against it, which is just never going to happen because probably barely 30 or 40% are even paying attention in the first place. The rest are just going to upgrade with whatever the main software release is and not think twice about it unless the price of BTC craters 70% to the point that they think what's going on. Otherwise, they're just going to be happy hodling on Coinbase, right? Or in their MicroStrategy institutional vaults. So that it's such a pile of self-created problems, but they're just reaping what they sowed in the exact manner that the BCH community told them about back in the day. Just took a little while for the bill to come due. That's kind of my perspective on it.
Yeah, I guess it just really sort of blows my mind that like and I guess it sort of comes down to the same thing. It's like, okay, but why this and not that? And the answer is probably like you were saying, it's the culture that they've created where like stuff like this just simmers, the frog, sits in the pot, and like instead of something happening by accident and then slowly becoming mainstream, now it's like it's on purpose. And like that's like for someone, I don't know, not even for someone like non-technical, but for someone who like is looking for a hill to die on, it's like I guess there's your opportunity, right?
Well, they have to draw the line somewhere, because the thing is, the day it came out, basically, as soon as Inscriptions was kicking off, and we did an episode of the show, I think number 80, if I remember right. So over 85 episodes ago, and we did a group episode, we got a bunch of people on, we talked about what would happen with the Inscriptions bug. And what we said on there was their window to change it is to get in there now and fix it. And that's what you have to do. You have to make a clear, attack at it, because the longer they left it, of course, stuff got built around it. People had economic incentives to keep it. The miners started to see a lot of money and like it, and one thing leads to another. And, then time is, the way it is, like it just suddenly that's the new normal, right? And so they should have fought that battle then, which is exactly what we said on the show that they should do if they wanted to get rid of it. But they didn't do that, or they were just upset but not very effective then. And then it's just been, like you said, the boiling frog until eventually they realize, oh shit, we're getting cooked. It's time to get out of the pot. But it's already a little bit late. Like the damage has already been kind of done. And so there is now some effort to make a bit of a change, which has led on to, Mechanic seemingly had the popular support there at the debate. But in the aftermath, it seems like the NOTs Brigade figured out that they had come off the worse for wear of that encounter, because a couple of days later, there was then suddenly a new emergency soft fork proposed by this anonymous developer, Dathan Ohm, which is very reminiscent of Shaolin Fry popping out of nowhere to come up with the UASF forks, in the block size war. I don't think this is exactly the same thing, but it's reminiscent of that. Surely a fork called BIP 444, which is ironically in Chinese a very unlucky number, because the Chinese is for 4 and is death, right? So the Chinese dislike the number 4. They think it's really unlucky. So they called their fork death. And what it was suggesting a proactive soft fork in February to change the various ways of storing data to make them less, possible on BTC, but also with a 1 year temporary timeout. Like this is some real desperation measures type here. Nobody's ever done a temporary soft fork like the government debt ceiling that you would need to renew every year, but that was kind of suddenly their proposal. So then they were in a lot of, mess because everyone said, well, you've spent the last 6 months saying that we don't need a soft fork to say this, and we've been saying, yes, you do. And now you finally agree with us and say, yes, we do. And your proposal is not only a complete reversal of your position, it's also kind of nonsense in that how's a 1 year fix? Like, not only does this only a temporary fix and you have to get everyone to agree to it, but on top of that, it's kind of making the problem worse in a certain way because it's going to disable a lot of the actual functionality that we want to need. Like, so we're going backwards if we're doing this kind of thing. And on top of that, they also wanted to have a reactive method. So they said it'll go out in February, but if there is suddenly somebody uploading an quote unquote unwanted file to the chain, we need to suddenly do like basically a 51% attack on ourselves to unroll that from the chain and put these measures in. And then it's kind of like, well, who decides on that? Who gets to call the starting? What if it happens at 1 a.m.? Like, it's going to happen at 1 a.m. somewhere. Like, people are going to be asleep. Like, this just none of it makes any sense. So it has really turned into a mess as the Knots guys are just kind of ramming into the wall of reality that their node running resistance strategy, A, was not popular enough to do anything, and B, wasn't going to be effective anyway. So they're kind of having to discover that that's not going to win them this debate. And actually, maybe their whole beliefs from last time around were a complete hoax. Or if not, they need to come up with enough excuses why this time it's different, like we were talking about before. So they're just in an absolute world of hurt. What do you think? What about this idea of a temporary soft fork? That strikes me as very bizarre.
Like, okay, so a hard fork is like an expansion on the rule set, and a soft fork is the restriction. So like, there's the whole backwards compatibility thing. To undo a soft fork is an expansion of the rules. Is that not a hard fork? What does it mean to undo a soft fork if not hard fork? Right? Am I crazy right now?
Not sort of, but not really. There was some debate about that because you're right. In the minutia, this is the exact logic that was being debated. The concept, I guess, was that if the soft fork rules include a timeout within the soft fork rules, then at the time you're doing the soft fork, you're making like a restriction. So it's this many rules, and then you're restricting the set to this many. But afterwards, since it just it's time limited, so it just expires and it goes back to the previous amount. Like, there's no point at which you've expanded the original set of rules was the idea, but it's a very murky area.
Yeah, that just sounds like. I mean, I don't know. I kind of get it. Like, okay, you said it from the get. You said it. It's going to work this way from the get-go. Therefore, undoing it is not
an expansion.
But at least my knee-jerk reaction to that is like, that's bullshit. You're just defining things however you want to make it convenient, and that's obviously a soft fork followed by a hard fork. I just.
But like this, even the concept that it would be a temporary thing, because their argument is, well, we'll do 1 year, we'll see if it works, and if it does, we'll make it permanent or we'll extend it another year, and if it's not, we'll figure something else out. But that is a radical departure from how there's no fork of Bitcoin or even any cryptocurrency at all that I'm aware of anywhere that has ever done a network-wide, like, temporary upgrade in that way that was planned to time out and revert itself. Maybe like the Ice Age and the difficulty bombs on ETH, but that was kind of a different scenario. It just seems like that's not going to fly, and it didn't. Everybody immediately was like, "This is a stupid idea." But they're really having a tough time.
Excellent drama, though. That's
gosh. This is so much fun. I'm having the best time. There's a great debate, by the way. Anybody who's interested, the link is on the slide. It's on Rumble on the Lugano channel. You can go and watch the full debate. It's about 1 hour. It's popcorn the entire way, basically. We've got one other nice little runoff from this is actually meme of the week, which is the BCH podcast in a full circle meta inception is meme of the week, because Matthew Cratter of Bitcoin University, with his 279,000 viewer propaganda BTC channel, was trying to get to the bottom of all this. And it turns out that the best explanation of what is going on here comes from the BCH podcast. So he was referencing our materials, and clearly had been reading up my FAQ about the soft and hard fork distinction. So let's have a listen to this video here from Matthew Cratter.
Actions. And then there's a hard fork where you widen the rules. A good example of this would be the Bcash hard fork. Bitcoin's max block size at the time was 1 megabyte per block, but Bcash widened the rules to allow 8 megabyte blocks, and doing so created a blockchain split, or what's called a chain split. This is what it looks like, where there's one chain before, and then Bcash widened the rules, ending up with a hard fork. They lifted their block size to 8 megabytes, whereas Bitcoin kept its at 1 megabytes. And then, of course, there was SegWit, which basically increased them to 4 megabytes if you count the witness. But this is an example of Bcash propaganda, so don't take this thing too seriously. But I thought it was a good graphic showing the split and showing what a hard fork would look like. The reason we know that Bcash is a failed hard fork, that's not just me saying that. Bitcoin BTC currently has a market cap of 2.29 trillion, whereas Bcash has a market cap of only 11 billion. And then there's a fork of Bcash called BSV, which currently only has a market cap of 451 million. Another way you can look at this is to think that current Bitcoins, one Bitcoin is about 115,000. Bcash has fallen so much that one Bitcoin is only $563 per Bcash token, I should say, and then BSV is only $22. So that's an example of a hard fork where the rules were widened, at least on the Bcash side of things.
So there you go. My comment was that, as Matthew states, this Bcash propaganda was a good visualization of what happened. Very unintuitive that propaganda would be so clear and accurate. Like, that's the exact opposite of what propaganda is supposed to make things more difficult to understand or be biased. The fact that the most accurate, compelling, concise, and clear example of what happened he found on bitcoincashpodcast.com really goes to show that they had the wrong end of the stick the whole time along. And it's just so funny that then his reputation for, like, the graphic says, which is Bitcoin, you decide. And it has, it was a peer-to-peer cash system, and then it became digital gold, and all the little facts there that you can read. But then his argument was the price. And he says it once, and then he kind of just reiterates it and says the price again. He says it twice. Yeah. Like, there's no other argument, nothing about the vision, nothing about how it works, nothing about the technology. Of course there isn't, because he can't make an argument on any of those grounds, because I've got all the facts listed right there.
Yeah, well, Bitcoin was itself a hard fork of the idea of money.
Yes.
And you can tell that Bitcoin is a failed fork of fiat by comparing their market caps. BTC only has a market cap of whatever the heck he said. It was like
2 trillion.
2 trillion. And the market cap for, the M1 or M2 money supply is, like whatever it is. Yeah. And so obviously BTC is just a failed project. And I do think it's especially funny that, like, which is Bitcoin, you decide. That's the propaganda.
That's the propaganda. Think for yourself, don't trust, verify is now propaganda. Yeah, he couldn't have picked a more perfect graphic or segment. But I mean, I thought it was very interesting because his explanation matches what I have written on the FAQ. And this graphic is, I think it might be in that article, but it's actually in the start guide. So I'm fairly sure that he would have had to see me discussing this on Twitter and probably actually calling someone out, which I've done several times, saying you're confused about this propaganda. Here's the explanation. He would have to see that, despite the fact that he has me blocked. So he would have had to, go to that little, you block this person. Oh, what were they saying? Or if somebody replied to me or something. Then looked at the site, then gone to the start guide, then read the start guide, and then been like, oh, okay, this actually explains it, and then put it in his video. So, anyway, it's all for the good. I'm very glad that 279,000, YouTube subscribers were potentially starting to get some accurate information about all of this. But it's just very incredible to see them walking all this stuff back and finding out that actually the BCH community had the more accurate information the entire time, sort of step by step like this. I don't know, Jet, did you enjoy this? This made my day. Like, I was smiling ear to ear for about 3 hours after I first saw this. It was amazing.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. Like, the price argument is so exhausted. I'm bored of it. And so just to be like, this is a good visual, but it's Bcash propaganda, so let's move on. Like, even if you're not involved, okay, yeah. If you're just a random person watching that, what's your take? Like, is your takeaway that the US dollar value is the most important aspect? Is that the crowd that you want to continuously bring in? Like, yeah, the answer is yes, because number go up, right? But
yes,
it's boring.
As soon as that starts to fall apart, which it is a little bit, the gains are slowing down cycle on cycle. Like, I don't know when we're going to see the tipping point, but we can't be that far off. It does feel like it's always getting closer, 12 months ago, if you'd send BCH podcast getting quoted on Bitcoin University as an authoritative source of information, that would have been a serious stretch. I mean, even 6 months ago when we went to Up Next, Speaking of which, it's 1 month until the timeout on that letter that they wrote in June. Well, no, we're already there, maybe, I guess. Until December, where it's December 9th of saying, oh, guys, please ship CTV, blah, blah, blah. That's all off the menu. The revolution is never the issue. The issue is always the issue. Exactly like we said. Everyone's built up with all this other stuff. Anyway, there you go. That's our drama observation for the day. But I wonder, like, by next year, it feels like there's got to start being some serious voices of like, guys, maybe let's just switch to BCH, because I don't know how much more tenable it is for this to all trundle along at the rate it is before somebody has a serious meltdown on a panel or something that we can do a clip of. It's got to happen eventually. It's getting pretty ridiculous at this point. Right. Community comment of the week. In some other good news, Kim.com, quote, I'm back. I survived a brainstem stroke. Let's get those fuckers. Bicep muscle emoji, end quote. So very glad to hear Kim is in good health and good spirits, it sounds like, and getting back into the fray. So I just wanted to give him a shout out and a moment of recognition. Health troubles are never good, but he's a true warrior for the cause of liberty, and he's been indirectly mentioned on this show several times, been a bit out of action for the last little while. So good to see him back in good health and no doubt promoting BCH. He has been doing a little bit of promoting BCH already, so that's good to see. And now we got our message to the community. You know how it goes, John. Every week we give the guests a chance to tell the listeners whatever they need to hear. What do they need to hear?
Yeah, I guess I don't have any I feel like, advice or anything, or at least I would be hypocritical to offer much advice when maybe I'm not taking it myself, besides like, just keep at it. But I guess I'll definitely shout out General Protocols and thank them for giving me an opportunity to do some work for them, because I've been putting together their YouTube Shorts recently. So if you haven't kept up with those, check out, follow them on Twitter, or they're also posted to the Bitcoin Cash and BTC subreddits. I put a lot of effort into those. It's the sort of thing where it might be like 3-4 minutes of someone talking, and I put a lot of work into like chopping it down so that it's still what they said, but down to a minute, because it's the YouTube Shorts have the limit of a minute. And I think that's actually a great limitation to have, that's forced me to be creative and in the ways that I chop things up, and I think the end product is pretty good. So that's just something I guess I didn't really talk about that I was working on, but I do want to both shout out General Protocols and then also shill those shorts, because I think there's a lot of good little snippets of information in there, and I'm proud of them anyway. So
yeah, no, they're really cool, and I love the little visualizer graphic and everything. Yeah, they look great, and I think I'm certainly not killing it with the short form content myself. I mean, we do have some of the clips, and occasionally one of them gets a bit more traction, but it's not something that I am the best at generating from this channel really. So yeah, I'm very impressed at the professionalism and stuff that they put into that, and the work you've been doing. I didn't know you were doing that, but yeah, it's definitely noticeable. All right, our Fund Me contributors, episodes 156 to 165. So this will be the end of another batch of episodes, and I will be launching another Fund Me for the next set of 10. So if you're listening to the recording, maybe check that out. It's not live yet, but it will be once I get a chance to write it all up. Okay. Majamali Marcelo, Jeremy is made of whatever profits are made of. Molecular, the show we love. At Cash Stamps, keep building and broaching. Erdogan Talk, economics writer. Big Hair, love the show, love your hair. Milton Friedman, purely peer.cash. Discover the thrill of quest hunting, find hidden cash drops, and collect BCH. Ryan Giffen, keep it up, please. DGN and FurQ, fresh hardcore BCH rap anthem coming at ya. The Green Comeback Kids, get it at https://nwb.cash. Cash Dragon, pump it up. Thank you all for your support over these last 10 episodes. Our donators, thank you very much. And our patrons, Ricky, Kyle, and HP. And our sponsors, General Protocols. Check out bchbull.com, doing amazing work in the scene. If you're new to the show, if you just came for the BTC drama and you don't know all about the hoax and how all this worked, check out episode 85. And you can try Selene at selene.cash, including the new version at app.selene.cash. But back up your seed phrase before you do it. And if you want to try the preview, the pre-release stablecoin mode, then join the Telegram, and the instructions and so forth are in there. Also, Blaze will be on next week at 6 p.m. Saturday the 8th or the 9th. I guess it'll be Saturday the 8th at 6 p.m. UTC with Callisti. So more coming up from the Selene team there. Any final shout outs or sort of sign off words, John?
I guess I'll shout out Sakib, because you mentioned that the shorts look pretty good, and he's the one that set all that stuff up, like set up the workflow and everything. So now I'm putting them together, but I think he did a real good job, making them look good. So shout out to Sakib. Amazing.
And where can people find more of you? On the Bitcoin Out Loud channel, right?
Bitcoin Out Loud. I'm Bitcoin Out Loud on Twitter. On Reddit, I'm AD1AD. And that's about it.
Jet, any final shout outs? And for me, my final shout out, I think, Peter Todd kind of deserves it for his performance at the debate. I've got to say, shit-eating grin on his face, lovely bit of, moving the conversation around. One of the best to ever do it. Absolutely one of the best to ever throw spanners in the works of otherwise productive conversation. And certainly staring down Luke, upset at him. You're a bad actor, blah, blah, blah. He just didn't flinch. You love it. Great work. Great work. Peter, keep it up. The further you can drag them into a swamp over there, the better. So love it. Thank you very much. Okay, and to finish, we have the song from Bitcoin Out Loud with the Bitcoin peer-to-peer electronic cash system anthem. If you haven't heard it, stick around. It's a good one. All right. Thank you all for listening. Till next time.
Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The last system fucked the world, so we're giving this a shot. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Yeah, the last system fucked the world, and we're gonna try to not. But what's the point if you can't spend it? Massive adoption's here, and I think I'm gonna end it. 'Cause digital gold's getting digital, and the dust I have is useless. This was supposed to be a tool for everyone in the world. Not another stock for Wall Street, not another horse for Lambo. Boy, speculators to bet on. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The last system fucked the world, so we're giving it a shot. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Yeah, the last system fucked the world, and we're giving this a shot. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The last system fucked the world, so we're giving this a shot. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Yeah, the last system fucked the world.